Good evening. This meeting is open to the public and is available through an online platform. Please subscribe to the Township of Wilmot YouTube channel to watch the live stream or view after the meeting. The only matters being discussed at this meeting will be those on the agenda. We'll start with a moment of silence and we'll start. Good evening and thank you for joining us at this time. I would like to once again thank all of you as we continue to put forth efforts to get closer to the end of the pandemic. I know we are all saddened by the closures, but put in place yet again. But I reassure you, these are important measures to keep each and every one of us safe and healthy. We are seeing an extreme increase in numbers, and I urge you to get vaccinated as a way to help fight this battle. And I would also recognize the loss of a very important member of our community, Mr. Michael Kennedy from St. Agatha. His loss will be greatly felt throughout the community. And it's actually going to be region-wide, not just in Wilmot. So it certainly saddens me that the loss that we now suffer. He was a good and gentle man. So thank you. And take a moment to reflect. Thank you. And if Councillor Fisher, if you're prepared to read the Territorial Acknowledgement, please.
I am, thank you. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. First recommendation we have is that the adoption of the agenda. The recommendation that the agenda as amended for January 4, 2022 special meeting of council be adopted.
Pardon me, through you, Mayor Armstrong. If I may, staff is recommending to council actually that the agenda be amended as follows. That the fire services report be moved to before the request for support of the proposed minister's zone order, and that materials received from the delegations after the Friday, December 31st, 2021 procedural bylaw deadline be received and subsequently broadcasted as part of the special council meeting. A couple of our delegations for various reasons were not able to meet that deadline. So with council's permission, we would like to suspend that portion of the procedural bylaw to allow for those their materials to still be shown as part of the council meeting. That is where the as amended portion of the resolution came from, or recommendation came from. Thank you.
Have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Gerber, second by Councillor Fisher. No questions or comments. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I will be declaring that I have a direct interest as defined in the Code of Conduct for elected officials on agenda item 5.1, I'm co-owner of the property immediately adjacent to the referenced lands and therefore have a direct pecuniary interest. I will be turning off my camera for that portion of the meeting.
So noted. Thank you. So first item will be the fire services, the award of the contract for rescue apparatus. Thank you, Chief. You're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the mayor, the report before council outlines some of the tremendous challenges that we're facing through global and domestic supply chains, procurement for products as a result of COVID and a number of other pressures. The fire services undertook this procurement process using a cooperative purchasing group called CANU through the LAS group. It's a huge 5,000 member public service group. And we wanted to, rather than going out to an RFP on our own, we wanted to leverage the buying power of the LAS CANU group through their RFP purchase process, excuse me, which allowed the fire service to access the buying power of that group. The purchasing was done through a committee to provide the specifications on present and future growth of the township and the needs of that fire apparatus, which will have a life expectancy of 15 years. The report outlines all of the requirements and the financial applications, and I'm here to answer any questions that council may have.
Any questions?
Excuse me.
Councillor Fenning?
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I think, you know, when I read this report, and I'm not a firekeeper, so I'm a farmer. That's where my expertise lies. So I want to thank the chief for entertaining all of the questions I had about details. I think, you know, when we're reading this report, the use of the word rescue apparatus is something that probably a lot of people don't really understand. And essentially rescue apparatus, as I would put it in my terms, would be fire truck. And obviously that's a pretty broad term. So what we're talking about here is what most people think of as a fire truck. And maybe Chief, you can elaborate a little bit on that and help people understand what it is that we're talking about exactly.
Sure, through you, Mayor Armstrong. A rescue apparatus is basically a mobile toolbox that houses everything from auto extrication equipment, vehicle stabilization equipment, water rescue equipment, PFDs, ropes, harnesses, chains, falls, chainsaws, generators, a whole myriad of equipment that we would use for a whole variety of rescue-related applications and emergencies. If that helps define it a little more. What it does not carry is it does not have fire hose or a pump, for example, or a water tank on it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Chief. I think that is very helpful for the average person out there wanting to understand this. And I really appreciate, you know, that you also answered. So when we're looking at that rolling toolbox and this purchase, this does not include the apparatus that is loaded into the tools, as you were describing. Those we already have on the equipment that on the fire trucks that we have. And maybe if you can just talk a little bit about how that plays into the renewal.
Sure, through you, Mayor Armstrong. This purchase request does not include a request for additional equipment. The equipment that we have today meets the council-approved establishing and regulating bylaw outlining the service delivery requirements to the community. So all the equipment that we have today will move on to that new truck. Quite honestly, the existing apparatus that we have now are very congested, and there is absolutely zero room for growth and barely any room for the equipment that we have on it now. So the new apparatus will be designed to appropriately accommodate all the equipment we have now, and any potential future growth will have some space to accommodate those needs.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have the clerk read the recommendation.
Thank you. That the contract for supply and delivery of 2 rescue apparatus be awarded to Commercial Energy Equipment Company, Pierce, as per the proposal, at a total cost of $1,279,980 plus HST, and further, that staff be provided pre-budget approval to incorporate additional funding of $136,250 within the 2022 capital program for the replacement of rescue apparatus at Station 1, Baden, and further, that staff be provided pre-budget approval to incorporate $651,250 into the 2023 capital program for the replacement of rescue apparatus at Station 3, New Hamburg.
Thank you. Mover, Councillor Fanning, seconded by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. So next we have a public meeting for report number DS 2022-001. It's a request for municipal support. Proposed Minister Zoning Order MZO, Cache Developments New Hamburg Inc., Cache Developments New Hamburg West Inc., 1265 and 1299 Waterloo Street. And we'll ask the CAO, Ms. Chambers, to provide some comments, please.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. The purpose of this special meeting is to receive information about a minister's zoning order and request for a supporting resolution from Wilmot Council, which was submitted by Cache Developments. For clarity, a minister's zoning order allows Ontario's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to rezone a piece of land without carrying out public consultation. MZOs can be used to fast-track development and speed up the planning process. There has been a significant increase in MZOs in recent years to help expedite government priorities. They can be an important tool to address urgent community needs. However, MZOs are controversial and spur public interest and concern because they bypass typical public consultation processes. Council may have heard about MZOs being used in other municipalities, and this is the first time one has been proposed in Wilmot. As such, your direction through this process will set a local precedent. It's important that Council have the information you need to understand the process and the opportunities and risks, especially since MZO submissions in other municipalities, including a recent one in Cambridge, have gained significant media and public scrutiny. Because municipal governments know their communities best, the province asks municipalities for support before issuing an MZO. They often like to know that other key stakeholders support an MZO application as well, especially Indigenous communities. Ultimately, the province decides if it will issue an MZO. The greater Golden Horseshoe, including Waterloo region and the Township of Wilmot, is growing. We've been planning for this for more than a decade through our work with the region and in our official plan. The region is also currently completing its municipal comprehensive review, which will allocate population growth, intensification rates, and greenfield density requirements to area municipalities to the year 2051. At present, Cache Developments is asking the Township of Wilmot to support their request for an MZO so that they can start developing land in Wilmot without going through the regular municipal rezoning process. The developers submitted their proposal to the township days before the start of the holiday season with their request for council's support of their MZO application. They have requested a very tight timeline driven by their wish to accelerate the project. Let me be clear that the developers' timelines are just that, their timelines. They do not have to be the township's timelines. Our job as township staff is to present the information to council for consideration. Given the short time frame, staff have completed an initial high-level review of the developer's request at this stage in order to prepare the report before you today. The report does not represent a comprehensive planning review that details all of the potential community impacts. Proceeding with a development of this size in our small community warrants meaningful consideration and deliberation, which is why we recommend receiving the report for information only tonight. Given the number of delegations that have registered to present information to council this evening, staff is recommending that this evening's meeting to be only to receive the information and to consider the recommendation in the staff's report. We know that council, the delegations present, and the members of the public will have many questions, and it will not be possible to answer them all tonight. We are recommending that delegations and members of the public be invited to submit their questions to the township clerk in writing to be forwarded to the developer for a response. I want to underline again that this is a developer-led process and questions should be directed to them. We are also recommending that council follow up with a potential education session about MZOs with the township lawyer before you decide whether or not to support Cache's request. As mentioned at the outset, this is the first MZO to come before council. It is possibly not the last. Tonight's discussion is an important one in the broader context of the township's approach to local planning and growth management. While the MZO process is new to the township, staff made best efforts over the holidays to ensure we worked within our legislative parameters while following through on corporate commitments to fulsome community engagement and consultation prior to submitting a resolution in support or against this proposal. As such, we are encouraged to see the level of engagement from the Wilmot community represented this evening and look forward to listening and understanding everyone's perspective on this important subject. As previously noted, we've changed the order of the agenda this evening due to the large number of delegation requests received. Again, we recommend that questions be invited in writing to allow sufficient time for all the delegations to be heard this evening. Following the delegation, staff will present their recommendation for council's consideration. And with that, I will turn the meeting back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. So before commencing with hearing from delegations, I would like to remind delegations of some of the guidelines for participation. Delegations will be allotted 7 minutes to speak. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate muting and removal from the meeting. Interrupting councillors or staff, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, hate speech, or defamatory comments. I will now call upon the delegations. First delegation on behalf of the applicant, Michael DeBesio. Ramsey Sheehan, and David Filati. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council and staff. My name is David Filetta, and I am a registered professional planner with Belfields. We're a planning firm that was retained by Cachet Partners, the developers that are proposing the MZO before you this evening. I'm also joined by Ramsey and Michael, who you introduced earlier, and they will be available to answer questions as well. What I was planning on doing this evening is providing an overview of the proposal and then providing some time to answer some questions.
Excuse me, David, could you speak up a bit? Maybe your volume is.
Okay, is that better?
Is that better for everybody?
I'll speak louder if I can. How's that? Better.
Good.
Okay, there we go. My apologies. And I do want to start by thanking staff. I know that they pulled together a report very quickly. I was very detailed, and I do want to thank them for all their efforts and apologize for having them to do that so close to the holidays. So with that, I do want to let you know that as a professional planner, we were retained by the ownership group to provide an analysis on the merits of adding these lands to the urban boundary. Based on our review and our analysis, it's our opinion that it does represent good planning, and the inclusion of the subject site into the urban boundary would make a number of important attributes, including modest. It's a very modest, small site at 43 hectares. And we've summarized our findings in our report dated December 2021. Again, in terms of what I'd like to do today, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the site, describe the proposal, summarize some of the key planning policies that apply, and outline our recommendations. Thank you for pulling that up. If you could hit the next slide, please. The site is located on the west side of Navziger Road, outlined in red here on the map. It's south of Waterloo Street, north of the rail corridor. Again, the site is approximately 43 hectares, just over, and it's bisected by the Ivan Gingerich Drain and a future trail network that was dedicated to the township by Cachet. It's also bounded by a 10-meter wide trail to the north of the site and to the west of the site. Again, those lands were also dedicated to the township by the ownership group. In terms of some of the surrounding land uses, you probably know the area very, very well. To the west of the site is the urban boundary, and it includes existing residential neighborhoods in New Hamburg, as well as planned greenfield lands and greenfield residential neighborhood directly west of the site. To the north are existing agricultural and rural lands. To the east is Baden, which is a residential community, and between Baden and the subject site are also lands that are inside what's called the countryside line, which I'm sure you're well aware of, as well as there's some existing community facilities which are located outside of the urban boundary, but between the subject site and Baden. And those are the Waterloo Oxford District Secondary School, Sir Adam Beck Public School, and the Wilmot Recreation Complex. Next slide, please. Just wanted to highlight some of the trails. Again, the blue dots show the existing or the proposed trail that goes through the subject site and connects down to the rec center and other parts, other public service facilities nearby. There's also a planned cycling trail along Navziger Road. And the development of these lands, which we'll outline earlier, will implement a comprehensive active transportation network. Next slide, please. I'm trying to speak quickly, so feel free to chop in if I'm speaking too quickly or if you can't hear me. I know we're limited to 10 minutes, so I'm going as quick as possible. In terms of the proposal, so this slide here illustrates the existing urban structure. The yellow lands are the urban boundary, so where urban uses are currently permitted. And the black thick line is the countryside line. And that illustrates where the township plans to grow over the next while, including growth to 2051. So these lands are outside of the yellow, so outside of the urban boundary, but plan to accommodate future growth. Next slide, please. So this is the master plan that was captured in the package. It illustrates a number of things, and the plan is for a master plan mixed-use community that includes a range of housing options, transit supportive densities anchored by a transit hub that connects to local and regional transit lines, includes commercial amenities within walking distance to housing, provides employment opportunities near the transit hub, and applies an agricultural theme that relates back to the community. So the transit hub is located along the rail corridor, and the plan is for it to connect regional transit to this township. It'll also allow for a destination for local buses to arrive. And then to the north of it, you'll see there are mixed use employment areas, which are areas sort of north of the transit hub. And they're strategically located near transit. And what it does is it allows for a diversification of employment. So you'll have different types of employment other than industrial, which is close to transit, like office, that will diversify the existing employment uses in the municipality. Then we've got mixed use areas. So the red and orange buildings, or the two red buildings in the center, those are planned to have commercial ground floors and residential units above. And we're proposing to accommodate approximately 28,000 square feet of commercial. And then I think the biggest element here is the housing opportunity. We know that there is a need for housing in the township, and the proposal will create a minimum of 1,200 new residential units and a range of up to 1,500. These units will include 150 seniors units, 200 rental apartments, 65 affordable rental apartments. And those are with rents at 80% of the market, median market rent for the regional market area. And then the remaining residential uses will include townhouses, condominiums, and single detached dwellings. And those are outlined. So the singles and townhouses are outlined in orange and yellow. And then the buildings along Navziger Road, those are the higher density buildings that are proposed to include residential apartments and mixed use buildings, as well as the seniors building. The master plan also includes an emphasis on active transportation. So you see a lot of green that connects to the regional trails, as well as a proposed park and agri-hub at the top of the plan there, directly adjacent to the existing rural lands to the north. The agri-hub is 0.97 hectares or 2.39 acres. And it's intended to be sort of a flex space that accommodates agriculture related uses such as farmers market, community markets, community farms, demonstration farms, kids activities, seasonal agricultural events, and educational opportunities. Again, tying the land back to this rural community. In terms of our analysis, and I know I've only got a couple of minutes left, we've done a very fulsome analysis in terms of reviewed the proposal against the policies in the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, and the regional official plan, as well as the local Wilmot official plan. And there is criteria that outlines when you are proposing to add lands to the urban boundary, there's a set of criteria that need to be achieved in each of those different policy documents. We've done our analysis, and our analysis concludes that the proposal does conform and it represents good planning. In terms of why we think it's important. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just sort of jump to what our recommendations in the report are. But before I do, I will highlight that in addition to our planning rationale, you'll also find a community area land needs assessment in the report. That was done by Urban Metrics, and it identifies a significant shortfall in new land to accommodate growth in Wilmot. It shows that the township needs 170 gross hectares of land to accommodate growth to 2051. There's also a transportation brief prepared by Paradigm, and that concludes that the transportation system, so the Navsiga Road, can accommodate the traffic that would be generated by this proposal. And then we also did a servicing brief, which was prepared by MTE Consultants, as well as Walter Fetty Consultants, and they confirmed that there's sufficient infrastructure to support the proposal. So our recommendations that the proposal represents good planning, conforms to the applicable policy framework, and would result in a number of public benefits, including new transit, diversification of employment opportunities, addition of new commercial amenities, full range of housing to accommodate growth and housing that the township needs, construction of a new park, 2 new urban plazas, public trails, and existing for the existing and new residents to Wilmot, the provision of additional ridership to support local.
Point of procedure. I'm just interrupting because I can see that the time has elapsed.
Oh, my apologies.
You have to make a ruling.
Next delegation. Barbara Schumacher.
Hello.
Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor and Councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you and the citizens of Wilmot. I am representing 50 by 30 WR. I will recommend that Wilmot Council pass a motion similar to the motion regarding MZOs, which was unanimously approved on May the 11th, 2021 by the City of Cambridge. To begin, I would like to remind you of the report by the Ontario Auditor General Bonnie Lysyk. The December 1st, 2021 news release entitled "Ministers' Zoning Orders Disrupt Land Use Plans That Took Years to Create" reads in part, "Ministers' zoning orders are being used to fast-track development, overriding provincial and municipal plans, which have taken years of technical studies and public consultation. In the 2-year period from March 2019 to March 2021, 44 minister zoning orders were issued. Prior to this, minister zoning orders were issued about once a year. Plans the willingness of the province to make decisions that do not align with municipal plans has upended the certainty that both the municipal and development communities need," said Lysyk. "Municipal land use plans and the infrastructure required to support these decisions can take years to design, fund, and consult with the community." End of quote. The numerous changes to the province's growth plan and the province's intervention through MZOs have undermined the plan's long-term vision environmental protections, and the principles needed to rein in urban sprawl in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Further reading from the news release, land use planning guides decisions about where and what type of development can occur, where to build homes, factories, hospitals, schools, roads, and other infrastructure, and where development should not occur. Effective land use planning can meet the needs of communities and the people who live in them, while safeguarding agricultural lands, wetlands, forests, and distinctive natural features and landscapes. The report found that enhanced NZOs can now override a requirement for municipalities to examine the design and technical aspects of a proposed development to ensure it is compatible with the surrounding area, a process known as site plan control. The lack of transparency in issuing MZOs opens the process to criticisms of conflict of interest and unfairness. There is no formal process that interested parties are required to follow to request an MZO, and there are no established criteria against which the minister assesses requests for MZOs. End quote. I will not go on to discuss the details of the 12 recommendations made in the auditor's report. My purpose is to remind you that there are problems with MZOs which have been identified by Ontario's Auditor General. Now I will present 50 by 30's recommendation. Whereas Council's discussion about this MZO has been scheduled after the deficiencies of the MZO process have been brought to the public's attention by the Auditor General of Ontario. As noted by Environmental Defence, Auditor General Lissick confirmed that Minister Clark has been pushing forward with inflated suburban growth targets and sprawl MZOs, with full knowledge they would undermine the long-term vision of the growth plan, lead to widespread loss of farmland and natural areas, put stress on water resources, and increase car dependency that fuels climate change. Whereas the January 4th, 2022 meeting was announced just before Christmas with short notice of the meeting agenda, when the focus of citizens is on family celebrations, could be perceived as a strategy to avoid public involvement, let alone debate. Whereas an MZO undertaken by Wilmot now could be interpreted as an attempt to bypass first-tier government oversight, especially given that the regional official plan review is currently underway with a deadline in July of 2022. Whereas the Wilmot Tavistock Gazette, reporting on Wednesday, April 7th, 2021 by Nigel Gordick, quotes Andrew Martin, the township's manager of planning, quote, "We have planning policies that are there to protect agriculture, to prevent urban sprawl, and the countryside line policies that frame the city of Waterloo to prevent it from growing." Further, the reporter writes, Martin said he's not a fan of MZOs because they remove the public from the process. You quote, "You may not always like what you hear. You may not always get the type of feedback you're looking for, but you're almost always going to get feedback negatively if you remove the ability for people to comment." Therefore, 50 by 30 WR recommends Wilmot Council ask staff to develop policies that allow for public consultation, heritage impact assessments, environmental impact assessments, particularly relating to the Township of Wilmot's and the region's commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030, and consultation with agencies before an MZO comes to Council for support. Thank you for your attention and consideration.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Barbara, did you send that via email to us? I'm sorry if I haven't gotten to it yet in my heavy inbox.
Yes, I did. I sent it last night.
Thank you. And then also, Mayor, I did want to point out a point of order, as the last delegate did not allow, we didn't have the opportunity for questions of the last delegate before Barbara was called to the floor.
Nobody raised their hand when he finished, Councillor Hallman. Everybody had that opportunity to raise their hand when he was finished. The same as we did with Barbara.
A follow-up, Mr. Mayor. I see that Ms. Chambers has her hand raised, but I would say that that opportunity did not occur.
I was getting to Ms. Chambers. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillor Hallman. You know, in light of the number of delegations that we have here tonight, it may be difficult to get through if we have extensive question periods in between each of the delegations. You know, we're very aware that there is going to be significant public interest in this, and many members of the public and the delegations may wish to pose questions as well as members of council. Our interest is in hearing all of the presentations tonight and would be open for some discussion as to how we can entertain council asking questions of clarification. We hold those to the end to allow us to have everyone present this evening. And as I suggested in my preamble, could we ask for written questions to be submitted to the clerk and consider them at a subsequent meeting, just in the interest of trying to get through the agenda this evening. But ultimately it is council's decision.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, the mayor. I think for myself, I'm fine with that, and I appreciate the explanation, Ms. Chambers. I think just the way that the procedural stop for the 10-minute delay, I think just kind of caught us off guard, because then there wasn't the need, there wasn't an ask of questions, which is normally what happens. So I'm happy with that. I will submit my questions to the Cache team. I just, for me, that was, I'm glad that you brought that up, because for me, it was kind of wondering about, we didn't get asked if there was any questions. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the chair. I do have some concern with going about it that way, and just that there may be a clarification question to a delegate that may not make sense if they have to leave the meeting and when they're done presenting and then bring them back to the floor. So perhaps for detailed questions, but I'm not in support of it for clarification questions.
Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just to provide a point of clarification, questions for the applicant that perhaps maybe members of the public have, that they would like the applicant to respond to prior to the discussion that is part of the recommendation on January 17th. Those are to come to me, not to Cache directly. So I just wanted to make that clarification, if you don't mind, with regards to those questions. As for the clarification questions, so yes, the applicant's delegation did alter slightly than what we normally have with stopping it abruptly. I think if there are questions of clarification, I think that's a slightly different scenario than extensive questions, or a question that might be more extensive being asked of the applicant. But of course, ultimately, it is council's decision to make that determination.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I'm quite happy going that route as well, as Councillor Gordick had suggested too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next delegation is David Jones. Welcome, Mr. Jones. You are muted.
Thank you. Okay, that's good. I didn't know how to do that part on this machine either, but thank you, Council, for having us here. I'm here as an advisor with the Food Systems Roundtable for the Waterloo region, and I'm also chair of the Waterloo Region Community Garden Network. So we're looking to expand food production capacity in this area here. I'm presenting as part of that Food System Roundtable with, along with Stephanie Garrett's a board member, and Stephanie's going to take over after I do this brief introduction here. Farmland, as we know, provides us with fuel, fiber, and so much more, including jobs and income, which should not be forgotten, I think. Everybody in this world relies on food first, and of course, and nothing happens without it. Everything else, including the value of a dollar, is based on the value of the food that we have available to us. Various organizations locally, including universities, lots of post-secondary work, and agencies are working on studying how our policies such as land use and planning affect our local food systems, our ability to feed ourselves locally. I grew up on the University of Guelph campus and looked at self-sufficiency as a very important part of what we do with pride as Canadians. I think that's still a very important part of what we need to have as a national identity and ability to feed ourselves. We're lucky in Waterloo region to have so much good information, so much good farmland coming to us, and so many people working on these issues. We're looking to the future. I think we need a better understanding of how our decisions will impact the province and impact the country and certainly the world around us. We are exporters of food in Canada, and that this needs to be, ideally, would be built into the vision for Wilmot. We're not an isolated entity, and I think the ideal future has to value land. Stephanie, do you want to take over from there? You're muted.
Thank you for having me. Yes, when we're looking through this report, this development states that it's going to be using up, I believe, I could be wrong, I think it's 43 hectares of land. In the grand scheme of things, how much land that is, it isn't that big across the whole world. But something we need to do is consider how much 43 hectares of prime farmland is when compared to how much prime farmland actually exists and is usable in Ontario and in Canada and the rest of the world. We also need to understand how much land is continuously lost bit by bit without really seeing it as a whole. In Ontario, we lose over 1,000 acres of farmland every week to non-agricultural development like urban sprawl and aggregate extraction. This rate of loss is unsustainable and will impact future generations. Is this the future we want to see for Wilmot? One that undervalues our land and the generous soil at our fingertips. This 1,000 hectares of farmland a day, which we are losing, accounts for lost by non-agricultural development. This doesn't take into account land lost to soil degradation due to harmful farming practices, as well as climate change, which affects such as drought and flooding. Climate change is changing the face of the planet and creating havoc around the world, leaving areas once fertile into barren ground. Forest fires, massive fires, floods, droughts, and insects infestation. People and organizations around the world are reacting to the loss of their farmland by circumstances that have no control. This course leads to ecosystems all over the world being torn up and destroyed, such as bulldozing our Amazon rainforest. How this relates to us is that, meanwhile, Waterloo region in Wilmot, where we have so lucky to have all this not be ravaged by all these devastating climate effects, but we in turn are destroying our farmland in order to create more urban sprawl when there are alternatives. While in other locations, other places around the world, there's not. Not only does farmland produce food, but it also produces fibers and fuels, and is also an integral part in filtering our water filtering and storing water, mitigating the effects of floods, carbon sequestration, and even providing habitat for our wildlife. Some species at risks actually use farmlands for habitats. And many of them are found for nesting and foraging in pastures and hayfields. I did not see anything in this report regarding looking at analyzing the migration or habitats of animals and how this development would impact local ecosystems. Water levels and flooding in New Hamburg is a huge issue. As mentioned, farmland is important in reducing flooding. When reviewing the council agenda, I didn't see anything mentioned regarding how this development with the massive amount of paved area would impact the flooding in New Hamburg. When you look at the Grand River Conservation Authority maps, it shows that the area planned for this development actually has the highest amount of runoff that can occur, over 400 millimeters per year. There's also a watershed that runs through this area near the train tracks. I did not see any information completed by staff to indicate what impact this development would have on that, as well as reports and interactive maps created by research organizations are showing that flood levels will not decrease, they will only increase. So by paving over this area, will it actually allow water to filter back into the earth, or will it run into the stream, which then runs into the Nith Valley from there? Or Nith River, sorry. The Agri-Food Hub, it's one of the features that highlighted, it's been mentioned numerous times, but I find it's just a buzzword. It's a word that's been thrown together, Agri-Hub. It sounds good, but what can actually benefit the community? So I was reading the report, and then finally I found the information regarding what it is. It's a green space where people can plant gardens or have a farmer's market, but really they're just creating a grassy green grass area, but they're using the word Agri-Hub. Sounds good. It's good buzzword for media attention. It's a great way to grab people's attention if they're not actually reading the report. But creating a grass covered area, does that actually mean anything will be done with it? Someone else, another business, actually has to create the farmer's market to use it, or the organization to create the garden beds. Finally, organizations around the world are scrambling to raise funds and to protect farmland. There are a number of Ontario organizations doing this. The reason they're doing this is because they know that the food shortages are going to hit us hard. They're trying to reduce the number of people that will go hungry and who will rely upon food banks and other services. They're doing this because municipalities keep developing and paving over farmland. How can council realistically say that this development meets the vision of Wilmot? I hope the vision of Wilmot isn't one where we only think of ourselves, one that ignores and rejects the impacts of climate change, one that jumps at the flashy words without doing its research, one that is stuck in the past and unwilling to adjust to changing times. I hope that the future of Wilmot is one where community and township work together to envision a new future, a future that will not only prioritize our farmland, but proactively protect it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Ms. Goretz, can you make sure that you send your questions directly to the clerk? Because I think those were excellent questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next delegation is Kevin Tomlinson. Oh, well, my correction, I've been corrected. So Stephanie, you're up again.
Thank you. So I'm also here tonight delegating under the Nith Valley Eco Boosters for Waterloo region, or for Wilmot Township. And thank you for allowing me to represent that group. I am a part of the policy group for many organizations, and I'm thankful that I'm able to present. So tonight I'm mostly going to focus on community engagement and the vision for Wilmot. One of the main questions asked by staff in this report is if this plan aligns with the vision of Wilmot. I would hope that the response would be that this development might align with our vision from 20 years ago, but it definitely doesn't align with the vision of where we want Wilmot to be in the future. Too much has happened in the recent years between the devastating impacts of climate change, the realization that we are far behind where we need to be in reaching our environmental goals, as well as the ongoing pandemic. And for us to say that a 20-year-old vision still meets and still applies, I think I have problems and issues with that. Not only do we need to have a new updated vision for Wilmot, but this vision should be included, updated vision for Wilmot, but this vision should also include a new way of engaging with the community, one in which we co-create this new vision. So in this report, it mentions a lot the keyword buzzword. I'm going to use the buzzword because I find developers use this often. 15-minute communities. It was used by our staff, and it was used by the developers, and you hear it used by media and everyone. But when we look at the surface, this development, Wilmot Village, would check off a number of boxes to meet some of the guidelines for 15-minute communities. But truthfully, it doesn't actually check off as many as we think, especially since we need to be thinking about 15-minute communities in terms of how it creates 15-minute communities for a whole of Wilmot, in conjoining areas of Baden and New Hamburg, not just for a new subdivision. A 15-minute community definition is providing equal access to core services and opportunities, with everyone able to meet their basic needs within a short walk or bike ride from home. It means that ensuring that the activities that make urban life livable and enjoyable are available to all, not just concentrated in a central or wealthy neighborhoods. This includes community scale education, healthcare, essential retail, such as grocery shops, pharmacies, parks, recreation, and working spaces, and more. You can't just simply drop in a new development and say they've created a 15-minute community, simply because they have a variety of housing types and office spaces. Before you can actually say that a development will create a 15-minute community or help your community create a 15-minute community, you first need to establish a baseline of existing amenities within your already existing neighborhoods. The township needs to map out essential amenities and how people can access them by foot and by bike. The most underserved areas should be prioritized for investment. In particular, there should be maps created for the availability and quality of grocery stores and other essential retail, as well as the diversity of housing and the quality of walking and cycling infrastructure, topography, and other factors. Again, simply creating a whole new community with mixed housing and spaces for business does not create a 15-minute community for that subdivision, and it definitely does not create a 15-minute community for Baden or New Hamburg. It creates an isolated entity. Something else that was mentioned in the report was transportation. Something that is key to what Nith Valley Boosters believes in is increasing transportation. They talked about a transit hub, and again, looking at it as a buzzword, great buzzword. However, what does it have? When you're reading the report, you can actually just understand, does it actually mean or say anything? The term is used very broadly, as if creating a paved area or setting aside a set of land for potential transit hub actually creates a transit hub. Nothing in the report indicates that this space would be actually used by GO Train or Grand River Transit. They mentioned that their 65% intensification would increase the likelihood of a transit stop. However, even the region states in one of their reports that the transit looks for around 80% intensification. I'm also unsure that if the 65% of intensification for this one area would actually have an impact with the rest of the intensification of Wilmot sitting at 25 to 35. So again, I would like to say that, using this transit hub and the idea of that in the selling feature, there needs to be a lot more dialogue and discussion of the likelihood of this actually occurring. The other question I would like to ask is Indigenous reconciliation. And has there been any discussions with local Indigenous groups, as well as a full analysis and report completed to analyze if this land holds any historic or cultural value? If this MZO is accepted, what steps are still to be taken? I'm just concerned regarding the process going forward with that. And then also, just finally, full public engagement. Again, the staff report states that over the last 20 years, there's been a number of ways the community has been engaged in creating a current vision of Wilmot. In response to this, I would say there needs to be a new understanding of community engagement, and that many people in the community believe that they have not been consulted, and that they have not been a part of the vision of the township. Full community engagement is more than just holding town halls and informational meetings to get the community response to already created plans. Instead, community engagement should be done at multiple levels. First, you need to understand your breakdown of your various stakeholders and people in your community. Who are your residents? Who are the children, youth, seniors, people with disabilities, racial and ethnic minorities, elders, community groups, private companies, business associations, delivery companies, educational facilities, experts, and others. When you're doing this, you need to look at who you're going to contact regarding in-depth engagement. This is for co-creation. This is looking at long-term engagement process. This is how do you integrate their vision into what the community looks like, what the streetscapes look like, what the trails look like. How do we envision the growth of Wilmot? That is what community engagement is. And then the low scale community engagement is surveys, consultations, and public events, but that should be used minor. That should not be seen as what community engagement is. So again, we've had a number of changes the last 2 to 4 years, climate change and COVID. Nith Valley Boosters doesn't believe that this development should align with the vision of Wilmot going into the future, and that we need to be having a better consultation with our community to better understand what community engagement looks like or what the vision of Wilmot looks like. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Steph. Kevin Tomlinson. Welcome, Kevin.
Welcome, honorable mayors, councillors, and guests. My name is Kevin Thomason, and I am a Wilmot resident, and I was shocked to find a notice posted to the Wilmot Township website late on Christmas Eve about this special council meeting for an MZO request. The announcement was only one sentence with few details. While MZOs have become so ubiquitous and despised elsewhere in Ontario, we have largely avoided them around here. With the exception of the Blair Amazon warehouse fiasco still unfolding in Cambridge, to the dismay of their mayor and council, and the glass plant MZO disaster in Stratford. The timing of this Wilmot MZO is incredibly concerning. Announced at Christmas, with the special council meeting being held right at dinner time on the first day back, with little ability to reach staff or councillors over the holidays, to get answers, and no opportunity for local media to inform the public, all during the most serious COVID-19 outbreak of the pandemic. For the first week, concerned citizens could learn almost nothing. Not even councillors that we finally reached had any knowledge, other than the MZO was likely for some form of development, leapfrogging the Fenwick Organic Farm. When township staff briefly returned between Christmas and New Year's, we finally started to get some information. And at 6:30 p.m. on December 29th, a staff report was finally released. That was a staggering 158 pages in length, including consultants' reports, maps, and studies. Certainly, somebody had been working on this for a long time. Even more astonishing is the scope and scale. This is for homes for thousands of people in an entirely new village with apartment buildings, seniors' homes, employment lands, stores, a transit hub, and even an agri-hub, whatever that is. Unfortunately, while it initially appears that this MZO is just about two beautiful farms, it could have far-reaching consequences for the entire province. It appears that the sole purpose of this MZO is to bypass the regional official plan review that is currently underway and destroy the proper regional growth and infrastructure planning process by having the minister randomly order the approval of these developments in isolation, with little regard to all the integrated planning, environmental assessments, and public engagement usually required. This absurd use of this Christmas Eve MZO by Wilmot and developers to get growth at any cost could be considered planning terrorism. Should this MZO bomb be approved by Wilmot, it will likely set off a chain reaction of competing MZOs from previously cooperative neighbors such as North Dumfries and Wellesley townships. Tremendous animosity will likely ensue as area developers and municipalities all race for their own MZOs to get their desired growth too. And 40 plus years of shared success here in Waterloo region will be at jeopardy. Wilmot will have pulled the trigger and launched an unprecedented attack on our regional government and neighbors, purposely seeking to cut them out and bypass our upper tier with this MZO, destroying the ability for the region to guide growth, intensify our core areas, coordinate plans, protect our countryside, and continue our incredible success. Almost everything that we take for granted today is a result of good planning, collaborative governments, and communities working together that will no longer exist when it is a free-for-all of developer greed and municipalities bypassing local and regional planning processes for an avalanche of MZOs from the minister and premier, who we know are so eager for development at any cost. So much of our success in Waterloo region has come from doing this integrative, progressive planning better than most others, creating the smart growth, balance, and results that most other communities only dream of. However, people too often underestimate how long it takes to create good things and how quickly it can be all destroyed. There are numerous other concerns. While these proposed developments have all the current jargon, shiny objects, and hot buttons, it actually appears to be more of a design for a prison camp of commuters, with row after row of square boxes crammed so closely together as possible with little green space or creativity. The only parks are located in the furthest corners and as distant from the seniors' home as possible. Lots are so narrow that entire front lawns will be almost all driveway, and so close together there will be little ability for on-street parking or even grass. This is not a progressive or award-winning community. We need a more compelling and desirable community, not the cheapest possible. There are also concerns about the nearby alpine fertilizer plant, pressures on the countryside line, the need to intensify existing communities, better utilize our existing infrastructure, and ensure that we're living within the carrying capacity of our already overwhelmed Ninth River watershed, particularly as we face an uncertain climate future. There are so many troubling questions about the rush, the MZO, the holiday announcement, and if this sort of destruction of prime farmland is even appropriate anymore. According to the provincial government, there are only two reasons for using minister orders: protecting provincial interest or overcoming provincial barriers and potential barriers and delays to critical projects. These proposed developments meet neither of these criteria, nor is there any evidence of this presented in any of the planning documents or even justification for the use of an NZO. As well, the minister has stated publicly that he expects before a city council requests an MZO, they consult in their community and ensure public awareness, engage with the Conservation Authority, and engage Indigenous communities, little of which appears to have happened before tonight for this MZO request. The regional official plan review is still underway. The land needs analysis and population allocation still haven't even been started yet, let alone any decisions finalized. There is plenty of opportunity to have these developments considered, particularly if they are as compelling as the applicant states. If things don't work out in the regional official plan, there's still the ability to do an MZO at that point. And if an MZO is refused by either Wilmot or even the minister, there is still a one-time 40-hectare urban boundary expansion available under the Planning Act that could also be utilized for these developments. In conclusion, there are no shortage of options. It is shameful to see developers trying to use an MZO to force this development here, and the outrage in our community is already significant. We don't want to see such important decisions shaping the future of our community for decades being undertaken in such a manner. This is not who we are or how we do things. Please reject this unfortunate Christmas Eve MZO and the attack on planning it invokes. It is not in the best public interest, nor the township's best interest. Please require the developers to follow proper planning processes so we can all continue to collaboratively build our world-class communities without the random interventions of Queen's Park, being beholden to the minister, destroying decades of regional cooperation, and regretting the use of MZOs like so many other communities. Thank you. Any questions?
Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I just wanted to reiterate, Mr. Thomason, thank you for your presentation, and you make all really good points. And of course, as we've already said, please send your questions forward to the clerk's office so that they can be forwarded. I did want to highlight, as our CAO, Ms. Chambers had already mentioned, that just to clarify for those that might be just joining in, is that the Wilmot Township did not ask for this MZO, that this came from the developers. And just at the beginning of your comments, it was mentioned. So I just wanted to clarify that we weren't asking for it, just so that we, follow the right procedure. So
yeah, it's always been ambiguous in the community, the way the staff report is written, if Wilmot is supportive of this or not. And it's been something the community's been really struggling to try to figure out. And I think it just speaks to the lack of information and the haste here. So certainly appreciate the clarification, and certainly the more information the township can provide to community, the better here. I will certainly make sure that I send in my questions to the developer through Dawn, or through Clerk Middleholtz, as well as ensure you get a copy of my presentation. Thank you.
Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just to reiterate, I believe one of the points that Councillor Gordick was clarifying was that while staffs has not had a lot of time to react to this or provide, as Ms. Chambers mentioned at the beginning, their full thoughts on a final report, which we'll consider January 17th. I think it was maybe the implication that council somehow played a role in the timing of the MZO or that sort of thing, that I think perhaps Ms. Gordick, or if not Ms. Gordick, that I would at least like to clarify that this wasn't something that a process that we were asking for or seeking, and certainly not in the timelines in which it was submitted. So just wanted to clarify that the timing and the impetus for the MZO does lie with the developer, and staff and council have been doing our best to deal with it in the timelines that we've been given.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Gerber. I certainly appreciate that clarification. And I know one of the challenges even was just trying to decipher that one cryptic sentence that appeared on the township website on Christmas Eve. It certainly hasn't been an easy process for the community to try to figure this out or read between the lines, figure out if it's harmless or nefarious or just what, but certainly appreciate the clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next delegation is Kevin Eby.
Unmute my. Good evening.
Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to, in fact, speak to council tonight. I have an electronic presentation, which was done on Friday, and I'll be the first to admit that if I'd had the entire weekend to work on it, I may have said a few different things. My name is Kevin Eby. I was formerly the Director of Community Planning with the Region of Waterloo, and more recently, I was a member of the Greenbelt panel that the province brings together to provide planning advice. Approximately a year ago, myself, 6 other members, and our chair, David Crombie, all resigned, over in part because of what we saw as the misuse of the MZO process by the provincial government. If I can go to the next slide, please. Just one clarification as well. I am not here in any way speaking on behalf of the Region of Waterloo. And I want to make sure there are a few references in my presentation to we, and that is actually speaking to a time when I was at the region working in cooperation with township staff. But I want to clarify that. I just want to start with a quote from John F. Kennedy: "A rising tide lifts all boats." And I think it's really important for us to understand that the collective 8 municipalities that make up the smaller region are, we're together in this. Our successes are collective successes and our failures are collective failures. Next slide, please. And in working through that, relationships matter. And that's really important. Nowhere in the province have various levels of government worked together better than in this region. And I think it's really important to understand that the 8 municipalities and the residents and businesses that live and operate here have all benefited from our collective successes. This is not one city winning or one township winning or losing or whatever. We are working on this together and we're having phenomenal success. When I look back 20 years ago, and for example, in 2002, we had a total of approximately 15% intensification. That's construction occurring in the built-up area, and our subdivisions and our overall residential development was at about 72% single detached dwellings. In 2019, the last year before the pandemic, we were 73% intensification and only 13% single detached dwellings at the regional level. We have made phenomenal changes and the community has benefited from it in additional choices of housing, additional transportation options. And what we're seeing is change that's occurring not because there was a shortage of single detached lots. We're seeing change occurring because we facilitated a change in the marketplace. Councils, staff, the public have all worked together and we've made tough decisions. Finding best fit is not easy. That's what our job as planners is to recommend to councils best fit. And collectively, we've done it very well. I sense there are some concerns about the township's ongoing relationship with the region that are showing through a bit in this process. And I think there's concerns that, if you can back up, please. I think there's concerns that in fact, you're not working as well together as it used to be, or that the region's moving ahead without due consideration. And I would hope, really, if you have a problem, really try to work through it. The relationships are really, really important. And the last thing we need is for something to happen that takes us in a different direction. Next slide, please. It can work. Together, we worked to stop the outward movement of Kitchener and Waterloo into Wilmot and out onto the Waterloo Moraine. We worked together to provide needed infrastructure, such as the expansions of the wastewater treatment plants. We worked together to develop the boundary rationalization process that helped maximize growth potential in Wilmot. That really came from Mr. Okrafka, and when we were doing the review. And I worked on behalf of the region and everybody else here to sell the idea to the province. And now Mr. Okrafka's idea is actually incorporated as policy in the growth plan. Next slide, please. Has it been perfect? Absolutely not. I mean, we have fought like cats and dogs at times, just like family do. But at the end of the day, we've collectively made good decisions that have moved this community forward. Next slide, please. You know, because whether we like it or not, we're all in this together and we'll rise or fall with the tide that we collectively create. Next slide. The region official plan MCR process, and it's been mentioned here already a number of times, it's mandated by the growth plan and it's been ongoing for over a year. It's to be completed in July 2022. There have been hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on studies. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have been participating in this. And key components, and arguably the keyest component of all, the most important one, is the determination of the need for urban expansions and distribution of the forecast population and employment. And that hasn't occurred yet. No decisions have been made on that. Next slide, please. So next slide. I don't really have time for that one. So lots of people will care. People are engaged at this point. And the consultation process, there's problems with it. The MZO has the potential to trigger other people going for this as well. Other municipalities will care. It's important to note this potentially circumvents or restricts their ability to have consideration given to their urban expansion potential. The region, the ROPI review participants will care. This blows a huge hole in the MCR process. And people running for office in the next provincial and municipal election should care. And that's not meant as a threat at all. What I'm saying is the public is engaged in this. MZOs, Highway 413 and the Greenbelt, potential development in it, people care about it. Next slide, please. Doing something just because you can do it doesn't make it right. And it's important for us to remember that. Next slide. Very quickly,
That's your time, Kevin.
I've provided the presentation to you, and I will provide additional comments to you as part of the process. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you through the mayor. Thank you for delegating this evening, Kevin. I've seen your work as you were, the head of planning for the region of Waterloo for over 15 years. So I really appreciate you bringing your expertise to us this evening as a citizen. I do have a question for you with your expertise since you're here with us this evening. Have you ever seen an MZO that's alleviated any pressure on planning or in that way? Is there any, I don't see value in positive things thus far. Is there anything that you have demonstrated, that you have seen that it has been positive?
I think the original intent of MZOs, it's important to remember, goes back quite a ways. And in fact, what it was MZOs were partly a tool to allow the province to make planning decisions in areas where there were no councils, there were no planning boards. People needed the ability to have zoning applied to their property, and there was nobody to make the decision. And that was the original intent behind minister zoning orders. I have seen them used for massive developments, such as Toyota and other huge economic development tools. I don't think I've seen one that makes an awful lot of sense at the type of scale that we're talking about here. There is one, if I remember correctly, where they moved a hospital forward because of serious issues in a community. They're good for that. This is really just a way for a developer to move forward in the queue, and it really does not make sense.
Thank you for that. A follow-up, Mayor?
Yes.
Kevin, I have one more question again, since you're with us this evening. One thing that has been lingering in my mind quite heavily is my respect for our two-tier government. I find that it works well. I find that my time on council attending Roma and AMO, the region of Waterloo, and obviously the two-tier municipalities within it have been celebrated quite heavily, and it's quite remarkable to have that experience when I have been able to attend and be, at that table as an elected official in the region. And we've had quite a success of integrating our planning and the way we operate in our region. I'm very concerned that this process would interfere with our forecast and planning and with the expertise of the planners at all levels with this. I'm just looking, you did briefly mention that in your presentation to us this evening. And I'm just wondering if you could comment a little bit that for me, how with us going through the next step of the regional official plan, how this could impact that.
I think it has serious impacts. And in fact, I think the biggest problem I have with the documentation that's come forward is in fact the justification analysis. To take the regional forecast and segment out a portion without any consideration of what's going on in the other municipalities is, it's the equivalent of saying, yeah, I can drive from here to Toronto in an hour and 20 minutes and not even thinking about the fact there might be other traffic on the roads. There's all kinds of things happening at the regional level, at 7 area municipal levels that all go into determining what the best fit is. And I think there are serious problems with the reports in front of you. And I will certainly provide those comments in writing, but it will have an impact. And I think, what you're speaking to as well is it's trust. We're all in this together. To have a developer jump to the front of the queue, get a minister's zoning order, potentially circumvent the ability of other people to be considered, because there's only so much land that can be brought in the region, is a serious, serious problem. It may actually stop us from getting to the best fit that is so important for these communities to move forward. And I guess what I would say, just what I would have said on my last slide, is I really hope that this has come forward so quickly. It's not, if you read the reports, there are conflicts in the reports, there are some errors in them. They've produced these very quickly. These are good planners. They don't produce reports like this with errors in them normally. So this has happened really quickly. Take the time, kick it back into the regular process, let the planners and the other staff do their job. And I think you'll get a good result. This, I'm not sure what you're going to end up with, being perfectly honest.
Councillor Gordick.
Thank you through the mayor, and I'll try to keep this brief, but because of your expertise in being a planner and that you've already had worked with Mr. Okrafka, one of the comments I've heard, not one, a number of the same comments, is that if we don't accept this MZO, the lack of growth in our community will kill our township. I personally don't believe that, but I'm just wondering if you could speak to that sort of comment that I've been hearing from those that seem to support an MZO in general, not nobody specific, but just if you could speak to that sort of comment that if we don't have growth, our township dies. I find that a hard pill to swallow. Could you speak to that, please?
Well, first off, I don't think there is a lack of opportunity for growth. There are extensive there's extensive potential within the existing designated lands. You can certainly intensify what's being proposed in the greenfield areas. They're coming in at an extreme, it's right on the line of what's acceptable, but it's not delivering the range and mix of housing units that in fact you need. And so you can make those changes. I think Mr. Thomason also said there are opportunities here to consider expansions if they're needed, both now, in the interim between now and the next MCR, which would likely be in 2031 if they hold to a 10-year schedule. So there's also all the intensification options within the existing communities that other people in other communities are recognizing are vital to keeping your communities, allowing them to develop, to deliver the types of housing units that the young people need coming up, that the seniors want, because they don't want to live in single detached units all of their life anymore like they used to. There's lots of opportunity. If you need an expansion, the MCR process or subsequent process will give that opportunity to you. I speak too much in a night that's way too crowded already. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you very much.
Our next delegation is Sean Campbell.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome,
Good evening.
Welcome, Sean.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I'm a lifelong resident of Waterloo region. And I'm here today representing Hold the Line, a local nonprofit that celebrates smart growth planning policies in the countryside line here in Waterloo region. We actually had our last Hold the Line festival on a beautiful farm right here in Wilmot. We cycled during the day, going around Wilmot, stopping at local businesses, as well as coming back for live music and celebrating, learning more about smart growth planning right here in Wilmot. We're hoping to do that again when we can all safely get together again and really celebrate the work that municipalities are already doing in our region, which makes us so unique in Ontario to preserve farms, forests, and drinking water. There are some great elements of this proposal for increasing intensification. I think that should be commended for not only the developers but also for the planning staff here at Wilmot for advancing intensification. Building up is good for our communities. It means more patrons for small businesses, less demand on our infrastructure, and lower environmental impacts. But, and there's always a but, that's why we're all here tonight, there's also some concerns as well, right? So, for me, a big one that's been spoken about already extensively tonight is we're abandoning the region in this planning process, that we're moving away from working together, instead saying that we're going to go it alone. And that opens up the doors for every other township and city in the region to do the same thing. But I think, for me, and something I haven't heard yet today, so I'll focus on that, is, when you ask someone for their opinion, you're making a promise to listen to it. And when we're asking citizens to give feedback on an official plan, engage in that process, take time out of their day, read these documents, and then we dismiss it all and say, we no longer care about your feedback. That's hard. That's hard to handle. That's hard then to ask someone to engage again the next time. We know engagement is so hard to get folks to show up to municipal open houses. We need to respect the process, not only because of what it means for other townships, the cities, the region, but also because what it means for that social contract that we have with residents. There's also a certain degree of abandoning Baden and New Hamburg. We have these businesses in the already built up area of Baden and New Hamburg, and now we're moving development elsewhere, as opposed to helping intensify it and look to see if we can bring more people who will act as patrons for these small businesses. Wilmot is certainly not the only community that is facing pushback against development and intensification within existing neighborhoods. But we have to remember that when we do engage those residents, those neighbors, we're only getting half the story. We're not asking the opinion of the people who will eventually live in those apartments, in that affordable housing. They're often not included in that process because they're not there quite yet. So I encourage everyone to think about that. How do we help advance what's already there? And looking at the list of folks who are here delegating tonight, you have a whole host of organizations and individuals in this community who are passionate about this, who are here to help. How do we help you, and how do we help engage the Wilmot community in order to celebrate that this is actually really good for our community when we build up, and make sure that we're including the voices that aren't otherwise being included. There's also some benefits of engaging residents and the community. And part of that is there's a lot of expertise in the community. You've already heard from both of the Kevins here tonight and others as well who have so much expertise. That takes time to get out. Now, I'm certainly not a planning expert, but I do have expertise in affordable housing. I run an affordable housing organization. I'm a management consultant for affordable housing organizations. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Waterloo, where I research housing affordability and development. And there are a few pieces that stood out for me in this plan. And I think it really comes down to just a lack of actual planning. It comes to, in this development proposal, that they moved really quickly. So there's some clumsy language, and there's some cases where I don't think anything's intentionally bad. They just weren't necessarily answering the right questions. So for example, there's a commitment to affordable housing. Who operates that affordable housing? Is it a developer long-term? Is it a nonprofit or a charity? How long-term is that commitment? In the city of Toronto, with their inclusionary zoning policy, it's a 99-year commitment. CMHC and their affordable housing agreements typically are 20 to 25 years. Or this could be simply that it's the first tenant, the first resident gets it at an affordable rate, and after that it reverts back to market. What are we actually agreeing to? These are almost all one-bedroom or bachelor apartments that are being created. While at the same time, the housing needs study being provided in this report is saying that we have some of the fastest growing community in Waterloo region, one of the fastest in Ontario. That means lots of young families. But we're not considering that when we're thinking about affordability. Is that something that we need to include and encourage as we go forward? There's also a commitment to pegging rents at 80% AMR, average market rents. Presumably that's relative to CMHC, although that's not defined. But more significant for all of you here today is they say average market rents for the region. 80% of the median market rent of a unit in the regional market area, which is interesting because CMHC produces market rents for the Township of Wilmot alone, which is about $100 a month cheaper than the regional average. So under this plan, it would actually be more expensive affordable housing than if we looked at Wilmot numbers specifically. These are just a few of the pieces here. We also have over twice as much land allocated for roads than apartments and condos. We have 3 times as much land allocated to single family homes than apartments and condos. So we're showing what our priorities are. Affordable housing on the side, in the corner. We don't know much about the longevity of that, the actual affordability of it, and we're not providing the land for it as well. When we think about doing this without regional consent or without regional participation, well, affordable housing is a regional profile, just as transit is as well. We're not engaging the organization, the level of government that would actually be involved in delivering affordable housing and transit at that transit hub as well. This is really exciting to think about what development like this could mean for the township, but we need to follow the process, honor our commitment to residents, and make sure that we're putting a lot of thought into what this means, how it rolls out. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, our next delegation is Mark Reeser. Welcome, Mark.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be here tonight. Honorable Mayor, members of council, staff, and guests. My name is Mark Reeser. I farm on Huron Road near New Dundee, and I am here today in my capacity as Vice President of the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture. I'm also Vice President of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, which represents more than 38,000 farms and farm families in Ontario. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on our township decision to deliberate the potential endorsement of an MZO, and also the opportunity to encourage you, both elected and staff, to plan well, to plan collaboratively with the region of Waterloo, and protect what's good and set an example for the rest of Ontario. We live in a very special place here in Waterloo. Our urban towns and cities are arguably the most dynamic and prosperous municipalities in all of Ontario, if not all of Canada. At the same time, surrounding our urban footprints is the most fertile, productive, and prosperous agricultural community in Canada. A culture of good planning, countryside lines, the protected countryside designation, environmentally sensitive landscapes, and innovative official plan densities that surpass provincial to the region's remarkable Waterloo region's plan and that of the accompanying lower tier plans.
Excuse me, Mark, I think if you were to maybe cut your video, that because you are breaking up and freezing on occasion. So if you cut your video, that sometimes helps.
How is that, Mr. Mayor? Is that better?
So far.
Okay. I'm not sure where I left off, excuse me. The content of Waterloo Region's official plan and that of the accompanying lower tier plans are responsible for our unique position as a leader in Ontario. Our plans are the template for good planning, farmland protection, and prosperity in municipalities throughout Ontario. The agricultural community is concerned that MZOs that are neither consistent with the provincial policy statement nor the regional plan are short-sighted, threaten farmland, and deny people a true housing choice. Furthermore, MZOs weaken the local planning process by providing developers with a workaround that circumvents good planning and fosters an environment where we and future generations are saddled with the ongoing and permanent costs associated with decisions made in haste in the absence of proper adherence to a plan. Good planning and official plans that intensify development save farmland, save the natural landscape, and promote sustainability. If the towns and cities in Waterloo Region had not experienced 40 years of good planning and instead had the same urban densities as unmanned cities such as Dallas, Atlanta, Denver, Orlando, you name the American city, our urban footprint here in Waterloo Region would cover all of the existing footprint, all of North Dunford Township, all of Wellesley, and additional townships. There would have been no land left in Waterloo Region for agriculture. That would have been a tragedy. Good planning works. Only 5% of Ontario's land mass is suitable for agriculture, and we are currently about 100 per day, or about 64,000 acres annually. Is there not inherent value in preserving the very land that sustains and feeds us through good and careful planning? Sprawl, especially sprawl that is done in the absence of proper planning and consultation, and a clear long-term vision for the future, results in not only the loss of farmland, but also denies families a true choice of where to live. The default location to live and purchase a home has long been in the suburbs because it was cheaper only because development charges and assessment rarely, if ever, covered the true cost, the long-term costs of servicing greenfield development. Recent studies in the city of Ottawa indicate that over the long term, it may be up to 600% cheaper to service development within the urban footprint as opposed to that in the suburbs. Real choice in terms of where to live requires that servicing costs be allocated fairly and that affordable intensification take place within the urban footprint. If we as a community really want to preserve farmland and the rural natural landscape, we need to build complete and livable communities in the context of the regional official plan. So let's enact policies that ensure density targets are met or exceeded. Let's promote policies that entice more people to live in higher regions, making it necessary to extend urban boundaries. Let's remove and reduce red tape involved in intensifying development in the appropriate locations with the urban footprint. Let's support a plan to enable affordable, appropriate, higher density home ownership with all of the amenities within an urban community inside the urban footprint. Minister Clark has clearly stated that if a municipality does not endorse an MZO, he will not approve it. So the power resides with you, council members. In conclusion, thank you for the work that you do. Continue to be an example for the rest of the province. Continue to improve and set the bar high. Be courageous as you make tough and difficult choices. Cultivate a culture of good planning. Be bold, be visionary. Don't be afraid to innovate. And never stop speaking forcefully and eloquently to those with money and power. And finally, there is only one landscape, and people and the natural environment and agriculture all have to share it. So please, politely decline to endorse the MZO that we have before us tonight. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. The next delegation is Rory Farnand.
Good evening.
Welcome, Roy.
Thank you. Good evening, citizens, Mayor Armstrong, and members of council. Wilmot needs to send a strong message to developers, development services, and the province that MZOs are not an acceptable practice that will be entertained for this development or other developments of this nature in Wilmot Township. Next slide, please. Simply put, I despise MZOs. They weaken local decision-making, they override local planning authority, silence public engagement, eliminate any opportunity for appeal, and shortcut environmental protections. The Ford government is misusing ministers' zoning orders to fast-track development on natural areas and farmland. Bottom line, what was originally created for very extraordinary circumstances is now being used at an alarming rate and must be stopped. MZOs are meant to be the exception, not the rule, and certainly not for applications like the one in front of you tonight. Next slide, please. MZOs are being met with widespread opposition. Locally, one only has to look at Cambridge to see how the Blair MZO has created mistrust and division between the community and its local elected officials. Just last month, Ontario's Auditor General suggested that proposals for MZOs under the Planning Act have the potential to have significant effect on the environment. In Wilmot Township, we take pride in being environmental stalwarts. Issuing an MZO for this application goes against our principles. Next slide, please. Wilmot has committed to positive transformation of its community engagement and public consultation processes. An MZO contradicts that commitment, full stop. It also circumvents the need to conform to guidelines set within the provincial policy statement or municipal and regional official plans. It is the ultimate fast-track tool for developers, while the public and their local governing bodies are forced to sit on the sidelines. Do you want to be on the outside looking in? Do you want the minister to make decisions for Wilmot? Do you want to set a precedence in Wilmot? From the reaction that I've witnessed from the community, The answer is a resounding no. Next slide, please. Expanding our urban sprawl while challenging the boundaries of our coveted countryside line to achieve further growth is a topic that is not new to Wilmot, our region, or in other areas of the province. In fact, I just read a fascinating article this week that talks about the cautionary tale of Mississauga and what is known to planners as the sprawl Ponzi scheme. Mississauga invested heavily in urban sprawl. The basic approach to building out Mississauga was to generate development fees by opening up farmland to developers. But once that initial injection in revenue was realized, the municipality was on the hook for ongoing maintenance and repair costs. This led to additional sprawl developments being approved in an effort to raise more money. But once that momentum subsided, it led to an eventual infrastructure levy and a dramatic rise in property taxes. Wilmot already faces these taxation challenges today. Do we want to follow in Mississauga's footsteps, or can we reimagine what our communities can look like moving forward? Next slide, please. In conclusion, this development and all large development applications in Wilmot require thoughtful consultation coupled with environmental and economic assessments. It requires that Wilmot Council maintain local decision-making control. It requires that established communities have a voice in the process. It requires that Wilmot Council not endorse an MZO for this development. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Rory. Okay, next delegation is Linda Lepel. Welcome, Linda. We can't hear you, Linda. I could tell that you could hear us, but we can't hear you.
Does your device have a mute button? There you go. You're
Now-
good now.
Now
There
I
you
should be
go.
good now.
Nah,
Sorry about that. Okay,
no problem.
this meeting was set for information sharing for the support of an MZO to remove 106 acres rare farmland from our planet forever. The National Farmers Union stands for strong communities, sound policies, sustainable farms. I'm Linda Leplet, director of the NFU local chapter, Waterloo, Wellington. It takes 1 acre to feed a person, and Waterloo region has over 600,000 people and about 200,000 acres of farmland left, which includes gravel pits in the statistics. If municipalities within the region are asked to continue rezoning land at the current rate, then in 7 generations, there would be not 1 acre left to grow any food. Farmers feed cities was once a slogan. Life in the city is only possible because we farmers do. But today, with import costs rising drastically, labor issues, climate uncertainties, aging farmers, and a shrinking land base, for many farmers, it's no longer worth the effort to feed the city. This MZO, like many others, is paving the highway to hunger. There is a need to feed people, a need to house people, and there are opportunities. For example, report 44 of the Ontario Soil Survey reads on page 42, gravel pits have no agricultural value. With proper rehabilitation procedures, they can be used as sites for industries, houses, shopping centers, parks, etc. End of quote. Therefore, we would like to ask the region and township to pioneer and develop policies that allows forward-thinking housing developers trade agricultural fertile land they own for already harvested gravel pits and other brownfields to develop vibrant, sustainable communities. Please, at all levels of government, rethink and reject colonial-style rape on our best soils, our life-giving Mother Earth, so future generations still stand a chance. The idea of designing a village rather than a standard subdivision bedroom community is a good one. But is this the right place? The next door chemical plant just across the railroad tracks on the south end of the proposed site is the major anchor enabling us modern carefree life as it manufactures, to name a few, fertilizer to grow massive amounts of cheap food, de-icing liquid for roads and airplanes that lets us travel whenever we please, liquid ammonia for wastewater plants to get our waste out of sight, out of mind, components for fracking fluid to reach hard to get natural gas resources so we can effortlessly heat our homes. But how good is the idea of combining a foreign-owned and managed chemical plant, storing large amounts of highly toxic material, such as anhydrous ammonia, and a brand new village? Accidents can and have happened in fertilizer and chemical plants. We all have heard of instances where a blind eye and a deaf ears have led to disasters. Since the MZO doesn't allow for proper local planning, it should not be named Wilmot Village. It should carry the name of him or her pushing and approving this application so we know who is liable if anything goes wrong. It is interesting to note that Fertilizer Canada, an industry association representing Canadian manufacturers, wholesalers, and retail distributors, have developed codes of practice guidelines for the establishment of a new hydrous ammonia storage and handling facility. Their codes require a distance of 500 meters to the nearest farmhouse and 1.5 kilometers to the nearest settlement for safety and liability reasons. The current government's regulation, on the other hand, the Railway Safety Act, anhydrous ammonia bulk storage regulations, apply to new installations and additions or changes to existing installations as of February 1965, and it still measures everything in feet. These outdated regulations read as follows. It is recommended that the distance of storage tanks with a water capacity exceeding 2,000 imperial gallons from schools, hospitals, theaters, residential areas, and other similar places of public assembly be not less than 300 feet, which would be applied by the planners if approved, a current industry code of practice or some 60-year-old recommendations. Don't think we needed seatbelts in 1965 either. A new chemical plant such as this would never get a building permit today near a settlement, but the other way around, it is safe. In bad times and at a higher population, we see vandalism growing. In good times, we have fireworks glowing and blowing. Even routine operation release toxins, for example, when unloading railroad tankers and the hoses are emptied, bleeded afterwards. A worker described it for me. Transfers are done with heavy-duty hoses. Rail cars hold about 72 tons in pressurized tanks. Transferring ammonia has many risks that require painstaking oversight. Anhydrous ammonia is shipped as a liquid and wants to become a gas with tremendous expansion capacity. It can be immediately lethal if it gets out. Wind vanes at the site show us where to stand and which way to run. End of quote. So my question is, where will you stand? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, I think at this time we will take a short bio break to give everybody a chance to at least stretch their legs, if nothing else. So we will be back in 5 or 10. 10? 10 minutes. So 5 after 7. And just get everybody to light up again.
This needs to be checked. If an MZO is issued, environmental protections are bypassed. There will not be any ability to make any changes to the development to address such problems. Question 4, how does this application fit with the upcoming regional official plan update? The region is in the midst, as you know, in the midst of updating its official plan. Will this development application fit within the guidelines of that plan? Would it be allowed under the lens of the new official plan? This MZO could risk destroying the collaborative relationship Wilmot has with the region and with other municipalities. Question 5, how does this development fit into Wilmot's commitment to action on climate change? The township recently agreed to taking action on climate change, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. This development will result in more vehicles on the road and limit our ability to achieve reduced emission targets and to acting on climate change. This is not an infill project that enhances and uses existing amenities and infrastructure where people can get to those facilities without having to get into a vehicle. I ask that Council reject this request for an MZO. There appears to be lots of reasons this project should follow proper regular procedure. It is not urgent. The development application should fit within a new regional plan and meet all Wilmot planning guidelines and all environmental laws. I see no need for an MZO at this time. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Hallman, you have a question for Mr. Wilson?
Thank you through the mayor. Not really so much for Mr. Wilson. Thank you for that delegation, because one of the things you brought up, which I hadn't really reflected upon, was the fertilizer plant. And I know that Ms. Lapel had also commented on that, and now that's kind of really setting in with me. I'm just hoping that staff can add that to their list of things that will need to be answered, because I have a lot of questions about that myself, and I would like significantly more details on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
I'll send in my, I'll email in my notes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So our next delegation is Mr. Barry Wolf.
Okay.
Welcome, Barry.
Thank you for the shift command, aid command. That was good. That helped me get online. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to present to council. I'm Barry Wolf. My wife and I live in Baden. Based upon the superb quality of the delegate presentations provided so far, Wilmot citizens can be very proud of the motivated citizens we have already living here. I'm going to start speaking quicker than my preferred rate so I can get as much in as I can. Everyone wants a place to live. Additional living space is needed in Wilmot. Potential development in Wilmot would be good, depending on the details of what, where, how much, and how it is done. Developers play an essential role in communities' growth and assume some risks, which they attempt to mitigate using their experience, connections, and any possible method they can of getting approvals through quickly and cheaply. Reasonable profit for business is good. Fiscal due diligence and not using an MZO process by a municipality is best, in my opinion. Cache Developments from Concord GTA has a vision of what it sees for Wilmot and how it wants to implement it. Superficially, there appears to be everything all 2,030.9 of the prospective inhabitants would want on 43.21 hectares out in the country. Be wary what you're getting into. Never step into water until you know how deep it is, where the stepping stones are, or what exactly is in the water. Cache Development has provided its evidence of what it believes people want in Wilmot Township. On page 103 of the Urban Metrics Consultants Report, it notes that people are looking for ground-related housing. 3 examples of desirable housing are single detached, semi-detached, and row units, all close to the ground, 2 stories max, maybe with a basement. People are pulled to Wilmot because they want ground. They want their own ground-based living space. Let's check the sketch that they provide on page 43 and see what it has. Based on the sketch, which does not have a sizing scale, it describes 5 of the residential and mixed-use buildings representing 800 of the 1,200 units, 2/3, as being 6 stories tall. If one uses the upper range of numbers on page 44 of the chart, it increases the density to 1,500. Then 950 of the 1,500 are 6 stories high. 1,353.933 people are going to be living in a high-rise 6-story building. Who plans a living space based on fractional portions of a person in a unit? Cachet does not tell us whether they do that by making each unit smaller, or they're going to add stories to the top, or they're going to take away other buildings and build more residential areas in that spot. We don't know. Of the 100, only 100 of the 1,200 units proposed are single-family houses, and they're designed to accommodate only 3 people. And that 100 is designed for just a family, a space which is not going to accommodate a family of 2 parents, 2 kids, a pet, or 2. This is not a family-oriented development, and thus is not a, what they want to call it, a complete community. Density targets, they're too big. They want to have a minimum density of 65 persons and jobs per hectare. The official Wilmot plan sets it at 45. The Waterloo region is at 60, and the Golden Horseshoe target is 50. This application requires the rural community of Wilmot to leapfrog beyond all long-term target minimums in the entire province, and they want approval now with a hurry up and sign to get the NZO application through right now. And the 65 is a minimum. They don't have a maximum, so we don't know if they're going to have even more people concentrated in that space. They talk about affordability. It's another buzzword, like as was mentioned earlier, about Agri-Food Hub. Affordability is only provided in the construction trade if you get more people in a smaller space, and you can then have the other people subsidizing the cost of construction of those areas. Height. Does a 6-story building meet the definition of ground-based living? And that is the factor which is pulling people towards Wilmot. I suggest not. The only structures I'm aware of in Wilmot that might be 6 stories are farm silos. There are 0 buildings in Wilmot that are 6 stories tall. Probability of completion on a timeline. The medical building is one. It provides for a 6-story medical building. They've already got 2 in Ira Needles that are 4 stories high, and a 6-story medical building is not a feasible project here. There's no demographic or business case to be made for a medical building that is taller and bigger than in Ira Needles. We can't even get a medical clinic in Baden because there is not sufficient population. It's a no-starter. Wipe that one off the plan. Mixed use employment won't happen. 4-story office buildings, 50 people per floor, 6 stories, 4 buildings, 1,200 people. They're not going to get 24 to 72 different businesses to locate there. That means that a builder is not going to build a building if they don't have tenants ready to go. Who pays for this? Follow the money. Who's going to provide the pay for the stormwater management ponds, the on-site pumping stations, stormwater sewers, the fresh water line that has to go in there? There might be a fresh water line there, but presently there's no sewage line as far as I'm aware. Who's going to pay for the connections on that? Play equipment. There's so many things in there that we don't know who's paying for what. This proposal would create an estoppel. That is a legal term meaning there's a legal precedent. You do it once, you're done forever. This applicant is looking for the low-hanging fruit. They want to get a development that is going to use up access to resources, which would limit the opportunities for further. There are some recommendations that I'm going to close because I see I'm running out of time. I'm asking council to consider 4 motions, mostly aligned with what staff has provided. 1, I would suggest that council pass a motion that report DS 2022-001 be received for information only. That aligns with what staff recommends. 2, that report and any potential subsequent actions regarding its implementation be tabled indefinitely until at least 30 calendar days after the results are known of the next municipal election on October 24th. 3, that council in consultation with professional staff advertise a series of dates for educational purpose for members of council and interested citizens of the municipality regarding the MZOs.
You're at your time, Barry.
Or staff be directed to consult with Cache Developments regarding seeking alternative potential strategies that do not include an MZO.
Point of personal procedure, we have to.
You're at your time, Barry.
Thank you. Appreciate your. Pretty much no. Pretty much.
Our next delegation is Kay Egley.
Hello, I'm
Welcome,
KL. Hi, thank you. I'm KLG from Waterloo, and I do have some slides which I hope we'll be able to share. I wanted to talk to you. Next slide, please. I've wanted to find out more about ministerial zoning orders, so I went to the provincial website, and as someone has already mentioned, they are designed to be used to protect a provincial interest to property or to overcome potential barriers or delays to critical projects. So like a number of other delegates, I'm asking what are these barriers and delays that we need to overcome. Next slide, please. And I found this presentation that was done to the Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks, and Treasurers of Ontario, and I thought it was very instructive. So these are the kinds of things that development proposals usually have to go through: the Planning Act, they have to meet the provincial policy statement, they have to meet the regional official plan and the Wilmot official plan and the zoning bylaw. And all those things. In the next slide, you'll see what happens if there's an MZO. We bypass all those things. So staff can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems to me that these questions that we've been raising tonight, that we will have an opportunity for some answers from the proponents at the next meeting. But after that, then I don't think there's any more input that we can do. Like, I think normally with a development, you keep going back and say, well, the official plan, I'm sorry, this doesn't match. You know, you have some give and take. So next slide. I just wonder, who is this benefiting? I can definitely think there could be some advantages to the developers, but what would be the advantages to the citizens of Wilmot and Waterloo region? And what could make it worth skipping the time to keep asking these detailed questions? Next slide. So this is where I'm going to share, probably do a little cautionary tale from a Waterloo citizen. So if it seems too good to be true, read the fine print to see what it will cost you. Next slide. And that's something that we learned with the Rim Park development. Different sort of story, but I think there's a common thread here. Next slide. Because the Rim Park was something that seemed like a really fantastic development, and it is a fantastic recreation center. Waterloo was way behind in needing facilities like this. So in 2000, everyone was really excited when they signed an agreement with MFP Financial Services to develop this. And it was only going to cost $113 million, and the rate was going to be 4.7% interest. It seemed like a fantastic deal, and we were going to get a really great thing that was going to help the city. But then a reporter for the Record spotted some bad math and found out that the true interest rate was 9.2%. And the total cost was going to be $227 million. Next slide. So what ended up happening after that was, well, first, the entire council, including the mayor that approved that agreement in the first place, were tossed out in the next election. The only councillor who's still involved in local politics, who was on Waterloo City Council at that time, says that he learned from the experience to really question the information that's put before him as a politician. And so that's really what I think a lot of people, and I will say to you too, because the financial fallout from Rim Park is still affecting me as a Waterloo taxpayer, and it will until 2031. I mean, it was an expensive project, but it's a lot more expensive than it turned out to be. So next slide, please. So like a lot of other people, I just encourage you to ask, what is the rush to approve this? We were trying to catch up and build a great recreation facility. And I think we learned the hard way that we didn't take the time to ask the tough questions that we should have. And so I will encourage you to do that and to do a lot more public engagement, because you never know, where's that reporter or that reporter-like person in your midst that will ask some of these questions. Some of them you've heard tonight. I think you probably heard enough tonight that you realize that it is important to keep engaging the community and have all this expertise that you have to help you to find out what it will cost you in the long run and whether this is the best thing to do. So last slide. Because if it seems too good to be true, read the fine print and see what it will cost you in all senses of the word cost. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Kay. Okay, thank you again, Kay. And our next,
You're welcome.
Our next delegation is Greg Michelango.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Greg.
Yeah, my name is Greg Michelango. I'm retired from teaching environmental studies at the University of Waterloo. I'm representing the Grand River Environmental Network, which has a number of members in Wilmot, and we get along very well with them. I've also served on a regional committee regarding the environmentally sensitive landscape that was pioneered in Wilmot Township, and that gave me a deep appreciation for the wonderful township. I'm happy that a lot of the previous speakers have brought up precisely the concerns that I myself had. KLGs with the debacle of Rim Park, Mark Razor, the great concerns of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture was another one. I also would like to mention that Mark mentioned they had 38,000 members. Many of the members of Waterloo, of the Grand River Environmental Network are also members of Waterloo, of Ontario Nature, which represents 30,000 people. And it has put out numerous messages of concern about MZOs. Now, I rather suspect that Cache Developments has provided us with one of the moldiest carrots on the end of a stick that I've ever encountered. It's interesting to look at the name. Cache with the T on it is a mark or quality as a distinction or authenticity. But if you take the T off it, you get cache, and that's a hiding place. A good corporation, a good development corporation, there are some, don't need to use an MZO. They're familiar with processes, they are sophisticated, they know who to consult, and things go ahead very well. One of my concerns is if you are to approve the request for an MZO, you're going to be falling in with very bad company. Unfortunately, no government in Canada has made such a mess of opposing needed environmental tools as the provincial government. It closed the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. It abandoned the cap and trade agreement. It fired the chief scientist, Molly Scheuchert, who was to help different levels of government learn how to make decisions based on evidence. 2 months after she was fired, she went on to win $1 million prize for the best scientist in Canada. They kneecapped the conservation agencies, even though they are regarded as world leaders in river basin management. The GRCA was proudly a winner of the Thies International River Prize that is awarded only to the very best river management authorities in the world. And it was primarily done because of how well it encouraged communities and individuals to engage in voluntary projects. It deleted reforms to the Ontario Municipal Board and reverted the old, outdated, and defective OMB, and on numerous occasions tried to squeeze little bits of legislation into omnibus bills that would have allowed construction development on natural areas, or to prevent municipal governments from regulating their concerns on aggregate development. It would be a disaster to do this. It will open wide the similar practices all over. And for instance, there's Mr. Broccolini, who has a development company that stands to make a lot of money off that new proposed freeway up near Vaughan. Another concern of mine is that with the climate crisis, we're headed into an area that is unprecedented, where we will have to build communities and take measures that we've never had to before. And I fear that this proposal is obsolete on that basis. It says nothing about vastly improved design proposals for carbon neutrality, provisions for using alternative energy, comprehensive community design, simple things such as having white roofs that reflect heat, guarantees of all sorts of measures, some of which we can't yet put our minds around very well. So if they're allowed to go ahead and develop that, these will not be good places for people to live. It has to be something substantially different, and Wilmot has provided the opportunity of telling them, no, we want to be state of the art. The art is still being developed. Let's start working on it. We don't want people to be living in outmoded dwellings where their carbon taxes on the fuel oil they use will be astronomical, where their houses, roofs aren't directed towards the midday sun, all sorts of things like that. So it would be very unwise to accept the minister's zoning order request. Just tell them, you don't need to do that. Come on now, let's get together and do something that is meaningful, that is long lasting, that respects the planet, and also draws on the ingenuity and the knowledge of people in Baden and New Hamburg. I remember once with my environmental assessment class, we went out to see where Union Gas was putting in a major pipeline. They had excavated it, and then they were going to show how they put the pipe back in the ground, and then they put the subsoil in, and then finally the topsoil on top. And along came the farmer from next to the property, stopped, he got out, he went up to the earth, took up it had been rain, took up a handful of it and squeezed it, and water trickled out, and he said, you guys, this is not going to work. Please believe me, I farmed this next door plot for 30 years, and this isn't going to work. The director of the project listened to him, actually hired him, and after that, they always had farmers engaged in leading the way in laying their pipes. So please lead the way on this one. Reject the MZO request.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, thank you again, Greg. And our next delegation is Don Casta. Ms. Murray?
He's no longer waiting in the queue. I have sent him a message, but I have not heard back from him yet.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we can maybe give him 1 or 2 minutes to try and come back, and then we'll continue. So relax if you can for a couple of moments. Yeah, that's a couple of minutes, so I think we can continue. Ms. Chambers?
Yes, Mayor, I wondered, in light of the fact that council had mentioned they did not have an opportunity to ask the developers consultants questions of clarification, would you like to bring them back to be able to pose some questions prior to hearing the staff recommendation?
Thank you. That was actually my next question. So does council feel they need to bring the developer back to answer any questions? Councillor Hallman, you have questions for the developer? Okay. Then we will do that.
Please just give us a moment while we ask them to join.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, residents. My name is Ramsey Shaheen, and I'm one of the principals of Cache Developments. I'm happy to answer any questions members of council, the mayor, or the residents have regarding our application.
Very good. David is here as well, and it's good to see you're accompanied by your secretary.
Thank you.
Councillor Hallman?
Through the mayor, thank you and good evening, and thank you for coming back to ask questions that we didn't get an opportunity beforehand. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. The rest I'll send through the clerk in that way, but some things were brought up this evening and some other questions that were sent through members of the community. I did just want to hear from your perspective what, oh, I see you walked away. Maybe I should wait, or if there's someone else that's going to take the question. Oh, you're good. Okay.
No, sorry.
No, the juggling of parenthood. I get it. I'm with you.
Just turning on the light so you could see me better. I didn't want to be in the dark. I did hear the question.
I just wanted to ask the question about when you originally planned to develop this property.
Yeah. I think a little bit of background is necessary here. I've heard a lot of the feedback tonight, and I've been biting my lip to try to respond. To answer your initial question, we need to develop this property since late 2020. We started the planning or the visioning stage for this development in early 2021. It was never our intention to go the MZO route. It's the first time we've ever explored such. We did not even consider or contemplate an MZO until around November 9th, which was the first time we were engaged by the region with respect to the MCR process. We were very discouraged by the lack of transparency and the. Okay, Dal, I need to speak now, okay? We were very discouraged by the lack of transparency and the nature of the relationship between the region, the township, and the development community. We were very scared.
You've muted yourself, Ramsey.
Sorry, I was just trying to get my wife's attention.
Okay.
Just to go back to what I was saying regarding the MZO, we've never taken this route. We know it's not ideal. We know it's not perfect. We are all for public input, public engagement. We want to do the right thing for the township, for the region of Waterloo. One side of the story that's been missed tonight is the fact that we are in a housing crisis. I encourage you all to come to our sales office and see the families and those that are in need of housing today. Affordability has eroded significantly, and we are challenged to provide housing solutions to accommodate the population growth in the region, in the province, and in the township. And so we are looking for input. We are looking to find the best fit, as Mr. Eby mentioned today. However, and we do value very much the relationship that we have with the township and the region. I've done this my entire career ever since I graduated university for over 15 years. I believe we have a first-class organization that brings forward first-class complete master plan communities that improve existing communities. We want to be active contributing members to the Township of Wilmot and the region. We are very active in Southwestern Ontario and in surrounding communities like Cambridge, a community known as Westwood Village. I encourage you to have a look at that. It's currently being developed. We're in the process of starting to construct homes in the next few months in the Township of Ayr in Waterloo region, as well as other municipalities like Hamilton and Brantford. So we do have a lot of experience doing this, and we do very much encourage public engagement and input. I do wish for all of you to be critical of the plan and the studies that we've put forward. We want to come up with the best solution. The challenge that we have is that the township has been considering these lands for development for up to 2 decades. They've been part of the Wilmot concentration growth model. The last MCR, they were left out. For 2017, the township and the region went through the rationalization exercise, and they designated lands protected countryside and countryside, with the countryside lands being the lands required to accommodate future growth. There is a long way to go even after these lands are zoned as it relates to the draft plan of subdivision process, the detailed design process, all of which will require input and the appropriate commenting from all of the departments at the township, as well as the external agencies, including the conservation authorities, the school board, the utility companies, and so forth. So we don't expect to be putting a shovel in the ground on these lands anytime soon. This is really a result of trying to raise a red flag as it relates to the MCR process, and trying to, we as developers and the township do not have any appeal rights with respect to the MCR process. So we felt that our voices weren't being heard. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
I just wanted to ask a clarification question, because something has intrigued me with the comment you just stated. So sure. If you're asking for an MZO and you're saying that you're not shovel ready, and that is my understanding, is that that's kind of what this is about, then why the urgency?
It's a great question. And I know there has been a lot of discussion about why prior to Christmas, and I apologize if that question hasn't been addressed. But again, there's a lot of urgency as it relates to the MCR process. All of this is a function of that process and the appropriate transparency and methodologies being undertaken by the region. So the reason for the urgency is twofold. One, because we have no recourse over the MCR process, and we haven't been able to provide adequate input into that process, and it's moving along very quickly now. And the first time that we really had a chance to see what the region was looking to do was in November. And for other timing factors as it relates on the provincial side as well. And the urgency on our part to have this considered. We feel it's again, we're in a housing crisis, and the timing of this is all very important. But it was not by any means intended to circumvent public process, public engagement, or input from the public.
Follow up, Mayor?
Go ahead.
My other concern was addressed by delegations this evening. Recently, our township has committed to reconciliation through the Planning Association, through the Stephen Clark's office. There has been a lot of that, and I don't see that listed in the presentation that we received from staff this evening, and I'm just looking for you to comment.
Yeah, that's another great point. We do understand the duty to consult with First Nations and the Indigenous community, and that is our intention to do so. We're currently completing a stage 1 archaeological assessment to determine if there is any significant artifacts on the land. And it is our intent that prior to the MZO being approved, that we would go through that consultation process with the First Nation communities.
Councillor Fisher.
Yes.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Couple things were mentioned tonight. One was about how tall the buildings would be. And I think Barry Wolf suggested they would be 6 stories high. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And the intent is to create a main street type of feel for Nafziger Street with 6-story mid-rise buildings along Nafziger.
Okay, because currently, I think our limit is 30 feet. So that certainly would be quite a bit past that.
Yeah, that would allow for roughly 3 stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I may add through you, Your Worship.
Go ahead, David.
I do want to add that as we know, the region is setting, and you've heard a bit of it today in terms of what the new greenfield density targets are going to be at 65 persons and jobs per hectare. It's quite dense, and it's a lot more dense than this township has seen. And in order to achieve those densities, you need taller buildings. And I just wanted to clarify that any new greenfield development beyond the current urban boundaries will need to achieve a higher density.
And 2 other points that were brought up tonight was the fertilizer plant and also climate change. How would you respond to either one of those?
I think the first comment I'd like to make regarding climate change is that there's 2 definitions in the Planning Act that speak to intensification and greenfield. While this is technically a greenfield site, I believe it checks many of the characteristics of an infill property within the built boundary. The only difference is that technically it's not within the built boundary, but it is surrounded by 2 arterial roads, Nafziger and Waterloo Street, a railroad to the south, as well as surrounded by many of the township's most significant amenities, being the Wilmot Recreation Complex and high schools, both of which I might add are outside of the built boundary. Secondly, and from a sustainability standpoint, it was one of the reasons why the first thing we did after we acquired this property was donate lands for the trail system to provide continuity between the existing east urban boundary and Nafziger Street, so pedestrians could provide walkable access to the township's amenities, being the recreation complex, as well as the high schools and the highways. And there's many things that go into a sustainable community. It's not just the configuration of the infrastructure, but also the housing that we intend to build, as far as Energy Star certified housing and taking advantage of other sustainable techniques, which there are several that we could go on to list, but those are the details that we're interested in. And we would welcome more feedback in that regard.
Yeah, if I could just add a couple of points in terms of sustainability. Transit's an important aspect of this proposed development, not only a potential link in connection to the rail corridor, but also as a destination for buses and having that infrastructure there. So transit and higher densities, as well as providing a mixed use community that provides commercial amenities and employment opportunities within walking distance, is sustainable development. That is the principal element of sustainability in terms of, and that's what this development is proposing. And it won't only make this community sustainable, but also the communities nearby that have to travel far for commercial amenities. In terms of the fertilizer plant, you're absolutely correct. It's a constraint. We've identified it as a constraint. We've had a consultant do a preliminary analysis. And that's why we've located these sensitive land uses. So all residential land uses are north of the trail. And we're still studying that to determine exactly what other mitigation measures would be required. And again, all of those will be implemented through the development approvals process. And as Ramsey mentioned, it still needs to go through a draft plan of subdivision, including those required conditions and circulation and public consultation.
Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor. I know Councillor Hellman's already asked the question, and I've been trying to listen, and I still don't have a clear answer. I still don't see the need for an MZO, as we've already heard through a number of people, including Mr. Eby, who has decades of experience as a planner. This is not critical. You may say that it's critical because of housing, but we have other developments happening within our community. The 6th story has me a bit concerned because within our current bylaws, our fire safety, big concern for me if we aren't able to keep people safe within our own residential areas. But I don't see the rush for an MZO. I don't understand why you're just not actually coming to us with a proper planning thing. And the other it's a little thing, but it's kind of bugged me the whole time. And I'm just going to put it out there. I'm just a little miffed that you guys didn't pay a $5,000 application fee. I get that this is an MZO, but other people follow the process. And I'm still not clear as to why you think that this is critical. So I'm voicing my concern with that. I don't see this being level of an MZO. It's not a hospital. It's not a plant for bringing in employment. There are other areas where subdivisions are being built, and we're experiencing those already in Wilmot, and they've all gone through the proper process. This to me is not going through the proper process because you're not happy with the region, and we've worked well with the region. I'm not happy that we're being put into a position of being antagonistic towards the region and their process, which has always worked well for us. And the timelines are set in stone that have always been worked that way. And so you haven't clearly to me answered that question.
Yeah, through you, your worship, to the councillor. Again, I'm a planner. I'm a registered professional planner, and I was asked to analyze the merits of the application in terms of whether or not it makes planning sense to expand the urban boundary to accommodate these lands. I'll let Ramsey respond to the need for the MZO. With regards to the 6-story building, I think it's important that the intention is to gain feedback from everyone through this process, and that's why a draft zoning bylaw was proposed with building heights to determine what, if any, constraints there are in achieving those the proposed master plan.
I think the only comment I have is, I guess, two comments. One, we weren't aware the $5,000 application fee was required. We're certainly happy to pay that fee retroactively if that's what's required. I didn't realize it was required, so my apologies for that. If it is required, we'll certainly pay it. Secondly, the concern we have with respect to the region's MCR process is the land needs assessment methodology. We believe is flawed. There's a significant variance between what we're proposing is required in the Township of Wilmot and what the region is proposing as it relates to the input assumptions they're using as well and the process by which they've undertaken. And our objective here is not to accelerate the timelines. Our objective is really to bring to light that we believe in intensification. We believe in leveraging the existing infrastructure within the built boundary and being able to offer the market a choice when it comes to housing. And we believe that choice needs balance. It requires a portion of ground-based housing, a portion of housing options that can reside within the built boundary. And the concern and why we felt the MZO was required was because we felt that the region's process was not collaborative, it was not transparent, and the intention was not to pit the township against the region, but to try to get our voices heard. We are home builders. The need that we satisfy is shelter. And like I said, we have many challenges currently being able to provide the marketplace, young families, empty nesters, seniors, the variety of housing options that our market currently requires. And that's the solution that we're trying to solve. And I'm hoping that we've brought that somewhat to light. The argument that an MZO is not required, like I said, it was not our intention to go through this process, is a valid argument. However, we believe that given the circumstances, there was an urgent need to bring this matter forward. And I believe that there are consequences to not approving the MZO for the Township of Wilmot.
Follow-up, Mayor. So for me, the consequences are is an MZO is also unappealable to us. While you guys are saying that you'll do some of the things that are on there, we have no backup either for you to actually follow through on those requirements that we ask of. The other thing as well is the mandate that's being put forward by the province is to go back to 1970s specifications for intensification. We've gone well past 1970 specifications with regards to climate change, with regards to intensification. So putting that impetus on us, and I do believe that it is pitting us against the others. You putting an MZO through here potentially opens up to Wellesley, potentially opens up to Elmira, Ayr, and I think that, you know, if you're not ready, this MZO is pushing the boundaries and you're also leapfrogging over another piece of property. So I feel that this was rushed and I really feel that you should have been able to go through the proper process and applied like every other developer that comes to our township. And regardless of how you feel about the region, I personally feel that that procedure has worked well for us decades. We've had excellent planning. Our region is world renowned for how we have planned. And as has been pointed out by Mr. Eby as well as Mr. Rosser, Waterloo Region's intensification beats some of the major cities of the United States. And we are known for being good planners. This to me does not go with our good planning procedures that we've done for decades. And an MZO for us is also unappealable. You may find it unappealable going through the region, but for us, it's unappealable. If you ask us to do something, we might not be able to follow through. It's a huge cost for our township with regards to infrastructure. And again, I still don't feel that this is raised to the level of being an MZO application.
Well,
Do you want to
the only response I have is I look forward to chatting with those that made delegations today, including Mr. Eby, in regards to the merit of our application. I look forward to trying to get it right. I appreciate your concern with respect to the fact that the MZO is not appealable for the township. However, I look to seek as much input into what we've put forward as possible to bring the best plan, best community we can possibly bring forward. The challenge is I can't submit an application through the regular process for these lands until they're brought into the urban boundary. And the regional MCR process does that. Assuming these lands are brought into the regional urban boundary and that hole in the donut between the existing urban boundary and Nafziger Road is filled, we are absolutely content with going through the normal process to satisfy provincial policy statements, to satisfy the regional official plan and the township's official plan to bring these lands forward through the appropriate approval process. We're not looking to circumvent that process. All we're looking to do is shed light on the fact that this township requires additional lands to be brought in the built boundary. We feel that the subject lands are the ideal candidate for an urban boundary expansion. They've been considered since 2003 as part of the Wilmot Concentration Growth Model. Your comments with respect to whether this meets the criteria of MZO are valid, and I take that seriously. But we felt it was necessary to bring this forward due to where we felt the trajectory and the methodologies of the region's process. And I look forward to having that conversation with the region and with those that made a delegation tonight.
Hey, thank you. Ms. Chalmers?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, some of those questions may be related to process. And if council does consider the staff recommendation that is before you tonight, I would suggest that some of those questions could be posed to the township's lawyer if council chooses to move forward with that education session.
True, very true. Okay, there are no more questions. We will turn it over to Mr. Okrafka to present his report. You're still muted there.
Do that every time. You'd think after 2 years of this, you'd learn, but nope, I can't learn that simple task. Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. The staff report that was put before you tonight was intended to provide councillors with some context to the proposal based on the township's historic and ongoing long-range planning. Certainly, there's been a lot of healthy discussion and a lot of good questions raised tonight. The recommendation of that report is that it be received for information, that if council deems it necessary, that you set a date of January 10th or other date that you would choose for an education session with the township solicitor regarding minister zoning orders. And the third recommendation was that council set a date of January 17th for considering the MZO request in open session at council. I think based on the volume of questions tonight that we previously indicated would be requesting the developer to respond to, that probably is too tight of a time frame, and I would suggest that council may wish to consider a different date for that discussion, and that would be the recommendation that I would suggest to you.
Thanks. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you for that, Mr. Okrafka. Appreciate that. And so, yes, I'm fine with the recommendation for the report. I'm definitely wanting to have the information session, and I would ask that we do reconsider the January 17th date for discussing, for taking this resolution for the MZO. I'd like another information evening once some of those questions and concerns come back from the residents to the developers, as well as any questions that staff and or council have that are sent, so that we can have a further informational evening, because I think there's still too many unanswered questions. I don't believe a report, granted, Mr. Okrafka, you do a great job. I don't mean it that way. I just don't think that by January 17th, all the information can be filtered for us to get a fulsome and accurate report presented to us to make this is too heavy of a discussion, too serious of a matter for us to get through before the 17th of January. So I would ask that we amend the third recommendation, that the January 17th meeting, we have a council meeting. However, the report presented for tonight be actually for information purposes only again. And then perhaps maybe after our next council meeting in February, a vote on the MZO application. I do not want to see a vote on the 17th of January. And I'll leave that to the clerk because I see her has her hands up for that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Middleholt.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. For council's consideration, it is possible we could have actually another special meeting. And we could, rather than having another information session, because one thing that we're wanting to do, of course, is to gather in the questions and comments from the public still, allow them sufficient time to come in, and then also allow the consultants some time to formulate a potential, to formulate their responses to this. So as staff have actually discussed whether or not maybe January 31st might be a potential date, or it is also possible for, and I think a special meeting like this one is beneficial, so that we have the appropriate time set aside specific to deal with this matter, rather than being concerned perhaps with other issues pending and whatnot. So you could either set a date like January 31st, or to say a special meeting for information purposes only at a date to be later determined. Is a possibility as well. I would defer to the CAO if she would agree that that is a viable plan, but that would be my suggestion at this point.
Ms. Chambers.
Yes, so we agree that in order to turn around for a January 17th time frame to be able to gather the information, allow the developer time to respond, and then for us to compile the information, it's not feasible. If council chooses to hold a special meeting, which I do think would allow for a more fulsome discussion, as Ms. Middleholt said, and to focus on this specific issue, since there's significant public interest in the matter, we feel the earliest we could do that is January 31st, but I would leave that to debate by council if that is a suitable date.
Thank you. Yeah, I would suggest that the third portion that council said that a date for consideration be determined at a later time, so that we have lots of time and it'll give lots of opportunity to figure out when is the best time and how much time staff actually needs to prepare the report for council's consideration, with all the input that we have received tonight, and that which I am assuming the developer will receive, and that'll allow that to take time to do that. So we don't have a specific date yet, so let's leave it open. But we do know that we're looking at towards the end of the month, at least. Ms. Chambers, do you want to respond?
Yes, I think it would be beneficial for us to have some direction on that, so we can ensure that we have some appropriate timelines and that the public is aware. If council does not decide tonight, we will certainly do our best to advertise to the public when a decision is made. But again, the earliest convenience you would have to be able to make a decision on the public meeting and schedule it, it may take some time to do that. I think it would be beneficial for us to have some direction as staff.
Yeah, well, like I said, I was saying that our target would be the end of January at the earliest, I would think, to give staff and everybody the opportunity for the process to take place. That, you know, the notification, everything that, so that people are aware when it's going to happen, the advertising, that it's out there. So I think that's one of the things we need to, and that's why I said that we leave that date open to be determined. And we're looking at the end of the month anyway. Councillor Holman.
Thank you, through the mayor. I am not in support of not having a date set. I think as council, we need to determine that. I am going to ask the Director of Corporate Services to hop on for a moment. I'm just wondering if he can comment when will be done the, just because I don't have the date right in front of me, when are we finished our 2022 budget?
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. The current schedule for the budget process would be to wrap up on February the 7th. However, due to some of the recent announcements for the province and impacts on staff, we're currently reviewing the budget schedule and may need to make some modifications to that. We haven't had that fulsome discussion yet as a CLT group, but I would say that we could make, if the 31st ended up being the date that a special council meeting was had, we could work around that with the budget process.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Chambers, can you unmute and so I can ask and engage with you if that's all right? Through the mayor, I am uncomfortable with setting a date prior to us completing our 2022 budget process. That's quite the demand on staff with this. This is a very concerning document that we have to review. I want to put my time and energy into making sure that I do my due diligence, that council does its due diligence, and staff does its due diligence heading into our 2022 budget. We are in COVID. We are in a threshold of the terrible pandemic. And to add this pressure to any of us is just not realistic. I would like to focus my hours and energy into the layers that require unpacking that I put in investing into the budget, as that is our current priority. And once we meet that deadline, we have a meeting where staff can then focus on this. I'm curious what your comment is with what I'm suggesting.
Well, as Director Kelly mentioned, we were considering the timelines of the budget anyway due to other pressures, including COVID. Oh, can you hear me? I'm having a little feedback. Okay. And so in terms of responding, I will remind council again that this is a developer-led process. And so the onus is on the developer to respond to the questions that have been raised by the public. Staff would certainly be preparing some comment based on questions that we will be receiving and things that relate to municipal relevance to be commenting on, but it really is mostly the onus on the developer. If council chooses to proceed with the education session, I would suggest that that happens sooner than later. And we have talked to our legal counsel. He is prepared to do that next week if council is able to, or if council approves that. And perhaps he can provide more input around the process and how some of the questions would be responded to in terms of the normal consultations that you would see under the Planning Act. And perhaps Director Okrafka could comment on some of that as well, in terms of what we would be commenting on as municipal staff.
Yeah, we can. There's so many things we could comment on a traditional process, and certainly we would comment on things like Planning Act, the growth plan, the MCR process. I think has come up enough times tonight that I would expect that council would probably like to see some information related to what the issues with the MCR that are being expressed are, both by the delegations highlighting that process and obviously the proponents indicating that by the sounds of it, was the trigger for the proposal in the first place. So certainly we can provide some information in that regard.
Okay, you have a follow-up, Councillor Holman?
Yes, thank you for the mayor. So just to keep us here with the agenda, so if we're receiving it for information, I am stating I have a significant interest in having an education session with our lawyer as soon as possible. And I'm asking to set a date sometime in February to allow staff, and so myself as a counselor, I can give the attention that I need to give and meet with residents in the community about this outside of the budget process. So I'm asking for this to be outside at the end of February.
Councillor Gordick or Ms. Chambers, do you want to respond before?
I certainly, I don't want to step in front of councillors. I know some have had their hands up, but I would just suggest if council is not comfortable with setting the date tonight, perhaps once they understand more about the process after the session with the lawyer on the 10th, that it would be appropriate to set a date at that point, because you can ask the question of the lawyer in terms of the process and understand what would be an appropriate timeline for turning things around at that point.
Ms. Middleholtz.
So what council may wish to consider, I see there's several with their hands up, they may wish to propose is that the third portion of the recommendation, that council announce the next engagement opportunity at the January 17th, 2021, or sorry, 2022 council meeting for consideration of the MZO request. So that way it is stated that on the 17th that we have the intention of making an announcement to the public as to how it's going to go forward. Just a potential suggestion. Thank you.
Follow up, Ms. Chambers.
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
Okay. Councillor Gordick.
I'm going to just defer because I took my hand down because I wanted to listen a little bit. So Barry can go first because I think his hand was up. If you could come back to me, I'll just leave my hand up. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I like the idea that Dawn or Ms. Chambers suggested that we have the meeting next week with the lawyer, and then we set a date and announce it on the 17th. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber, Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, just a quick question about next week's meeting, as far as it being a sort of an educational matter with our solicitor. Would that be a closed session or an open session? Just curious about that. And then also, as far as the timelines go on the meeting, I just would want to make sure that I know the minister ultimately will determine, this application. I just want to make sure there's no timelines attached to the application such that the minister might feel the need or even the possibility to make a decision before we would have a chance to provide our thoughts on it. I just want to make sure that we're not missing any boat there by any chance. Thanks.
Ms. Middleholtz, you want to comment?
I can only comment on the first part of your question, Councillor Gerber, and that's that the meeting with the solicitor would be an in-camera or closed session with regards to education and training, as well as solicitor-client privilege.
Ms. Chambers?
Just as a follow-up to that, we did have some inquiries from members of the public and delegates pertaining to whether the education session would be an open or closed session. And we had originally thought open session because, you know, the public is going to be interested in learning about the process as well. In discussing it with our legal counsel, they did recommend that it be enclosed, simply because there could be some questions posed of a legal nature, and it would not be recommended for our solicitor to be providing that advice in a public session.
Okay. Councillor Hallman.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mayor Armstrong, just a follow-up on the timing, the second sort of part of my question. I just want to make sure we're not missing an opportunity to provide our comments to the minister by doing so perhaps in mid to late February.
Ms. Chambers.
Again, that's something that we can't really answer because we haven't been having the discussions. This is developer led, and they're the ones who have been engaging with the province on this. So that's something we can't comment on.
Ms. Middleholtz, you have a comment? Councillor Hallman.
Thank you through the mayor. I'm just going to, Councillor Gerber, I just think one thing is really important to understand, and I'm just going to quote something from Minister Clark. I'll send you a link after, but I do think it's important for the public to hear this as well, that Minister Clark is clear and that every MZO on a non-provincial land has been at the request of a local municipality. They are in the driver's seat. So once council determines its actions, that goes to the desk of Steve Clark. So it is within our hands as elected officials to determine that. So we are in the driver's seat according to Steve Clark's office and the Ford government's office. To my second thing was going to be that I am in support of the clerk's suggestion for modifying the 17th to be amended to read that we will announce that date. So I will move that amended third line.
Excuse me, through you, Mayor Armstrong. With council's permission, I'd like to just kind of share a bit of a rewording, if that is permissible. Because I'm always so good at the screen sharing here. That one there, I think. And are you seeing the right thing?
So if everybody's had a chance to read that. Ms. Chambers.
I would just suggest that if this is being moved in the second paragraph, that if council deemed required, if council passes this motion, then I think you're deeming it's required. So I would just remove that piece and say that council set a date of January 10th.
Just like magic, it's done. Okay, Councillor Gordick, you had another comment?
Sorry, again, Mr. Gerber, I think, sorry, Councillor Gerber, sorry, Jeff. I just keep throwing all the names out there. Councillor Gerber, I don't think had finished because I think he had his hand up. So I'll defer to him because I think he had a bit of a follow-up, and then I will ask the question.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Gerber.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Gordick. Appreciate that. Councillor Hallman, I think I just want to make sure there's not a distinction between MZOs that are done at the request of a local council and MZOs that are developer driven. Like we were referenced to many MZOs tonight, for example, the Stratford ones, the Blair ones. They were initiated by the local council. So I just wanted to make sure that quote you provided wasn't Minister Clark's views on MZOs that were initiated by a council and council's guaranteed opportunity to sort of comment on those versus MZOs driven by developer. And I know that the government has stated that they take into consideration and would not act without a local council rendering their opinion. But we also know that that governments don't sometimes, despite their best intentions, always follow through on things that aren't necessarily written down in code or codified, but rather just wishes and the statements of what we hope to do. So again, I would just want to make sure, and I guess we won't know that that they will indeed wait for our comment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, and I'm sure I'm reading it correctly, but the meeting that we will give a notice on the 17th will only be for information purposes. I just want to clarify that the meeting that we give a date of, if it becomes January the 31st or after our budget meetings in February, that it will again be a further only information session, not a vote for council on the MZO. I just wanted to make sure that that's what I'm understood when I put that forward at the beginning of all this sort of conversation. I want to make sure that we all understand we're on the same page, because while we've changed that date, I get that. However, because of what Councillor Gerber has brought up, I want to ensure that there's no mistakes and no misunderstandings when we come back January the 17th, that we're not throwing a curveball, and especially to our residents who've been listening in on this this meeting tonight, that people's perceptions and understandings of tonight's events are clear.
Okay, Councillor Gerber, you had a follow-up to that?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Councillor Gordick, because that I don't think would have been my understanding. I think my understanding would have been that we were providing time for all the questions to get to the developer, for the developer to have an opportunity to reply to all the questions, for staff to sort of, be sort of party to all those, the exchange of information and questions and answers back and forth, and to be able to take that information, they can share it with us as it comes in, and provide a report and a recommendation. And by the 14th of February, or not the 21st, which is Family Day, perhaps the 28th of February, that when we did meet again, we could continue to hear from delegations and make a decision at that point. I guess we're instead suggesting another meeting somewhat like this one, followed yet by another meeting probably somewhat like this one, where we will then make a decision. And I just didn't necessarily see the need for that in-between meeting that it seems to be what that we're proposing.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes, we definitely need clarification on that, as to when the matter would be considered by council. I know that, going back to the initial request of the developer, they were asking that the matter be considered in January for a decision. I understand, from what we've heard from the public tonight, that they are concerned with that timeline. But I think it would be expedient to at least be able to provide the developer with an idea of when the matter would be considered.
That's very true. We should be able to do that. So from the conversation that we're having, it is suggested that we're having the next meeting that will be announced on the 17th will just be another special council meeting for the purpose of receiving information and no decision being made. And so now we need to give a timeline to the developer as to when that decision will be made. Ms. Middleholtz, did you have a comment? No. Hey, what's that? I unfortunately, I don't see her on.
Oh,
Cheryl, did you have?
Yeah. Sorry, through you. I just kind of to follow up. I think the point being would be is that the information and then the next meeting after I think there was too many, from what I got out of this, there's still too many unanswered questions. And I would like to ensure that we dot our I's and cross our T's over such a decision of this magnitude, that the meeting that we've had this evening has been great, but it's opened up an awful lot of other questions to follow up on. So I would be agreeable for us to have another information meeting scheduled, as Councillor Hallman suggested, after our budgets, because of staff and staffing issues with perhaps COVID related staff implications, as well as our budget is a very important document that we need to spend the time on. And I don't know the time constraints of our staff to be able to get there. I'm appreciative of the time and energy that's needed to prepare our budget reports for us. And I don't think that this undue pressure is fair on our staff. So I'm comfortable with the meeting in February for information purposes, and then perhaps the following council meeting to make a final decision on this MZO application. So I'm looking at perhaps by the end of February making a decision. And that's kind of where my thought process was.
Okay, Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Councillor Gordick echoed my feelings and summarized them exactly. That's where I stand as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I'm going to agree with Councillor Gerber. I don't see the need of having 2 more meetings, but I guess what we could do is have a special meeting where people can obviously talk and that, but I would like to see a decision made at the end of that meeting if we could.
Councillor Gerber.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I think we may have found some middle ground here. I was, to me, it's the extension of the meeting sort of on into the calendar that I was sort of most worried about for all concerned. I think if we have an end of February deadline for a decision, and if we have a meeting for information and then a meeting to make the decision, say the 14th and the 28th, rather than one sort of big omnibus meeting on the 14th or the 28th. I think just the idea of sort of having an end date on it so that everyone involved, both the public and obviously, our staff, the region, et cetera, know that, that there'll be a decision February 28th. And if that takes us 2 meetings to get there, I think I'm okay with that. I just wouldn't want it to, take 2 meetings and that second meeting end up, I don't know, after March break is going to be the next thing that we could potentially run into. So, if the resolution sort of states something about, an information meeting at the appropriate time in February and a decision-making meeting at the appropriate time in February, given where we may end up with budget, I think that's a great way forward.
Thank you. Ms. Middleholtz, you have a comment?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I just wanted to make a note, and perhaps the deputy clerk can correct me if I'm wrong. However, I believe that at this point in time, we've only had the motion raised by Councillor Hallman, but there hasn't been a seconder to the motion. So at this point in time, if there is any sort of amendment, it would be coming through Councillor Hallman. And as I said, I don't believe we've had a seconder at this time. So I just wanted to bring up that little procedural note. Thank you. Apparently, Councillor Gordick is suggesting she would like to second it.
Okay, so what you're saying is that we will read the motion as amended, or to have a motion to accept the amendments to the motion?
Just my apologies, just like Mr. Okrapka, it's only been 2 years. You'd think I'd know how to work this stuff by now. So at this point in time, yes, it would be that if Councillor Holman wants to make an amendment to this, right now, this is what was suggested by, I'm paraphrasing what Councillor Gordick had suggested for the purposes of reviewing information relative to the MZO request. If it is acceptable to the mover and seconder, we could add on something to the effect of with the intention of a decision being provided to the applicant by the end of February, or some other language to that effect, depending on what council is looking for, by the end of the first quarter of 2022 or something along those lines. It's up to council as to how they wish to word that.
Councillor Fisher, you had your hand up there.
Sorry, I just forgot to lower it.
You're forgiven. Councillor Holman.
Thank you through the mayor. Procedurally, thank you for that, Ms. Middleholtz. I'm going to ask Ms. Chambers just to unmute and hop on and just comment on that piece, because when I'm looking back at my notes that I was scribbling down while she was speaking as to her recommendation, is this lining up with what you had thought, Ms. Chambers?
I feel like the third piece of this this motion is a little confusing, if I'm being honest, and I'd like to have a bit more clarity on that. So, if is it council's intent to bring the matter back to the table on January 17th, in which at that point we would be scheduling the special meeting from there? Like
that is how I'm interpreting it, is that, sorry, through the mayor, that at the January 17th meeting, we are going to announce the date that we set after we have an opportunity to discuss with legal,
right?
That and receive, kind of have that discussion. And it's kind of hard to forecast when we, don't have that legal discussion yet. But my intention is that on the 17th, we would announce a meeting to have the applicant to present the answers to us and to the public that have been asked. And then at that point, set a date for the final decision. I think that it is, this is the first MZO request, the layers involved. I would personally not be comfortable with making a decision on that evening. I want time to digest. So I'm asking for my peers and my colleagues to support that, so we can have time to fully digest the data with such an imperative decision in front of us, so that, yes, the 17th, we receive we announce what date would be going forward. After that, we set the following council meeting to have that completed.
Okay, and so at that point, you would be looking to schedule the public meeting. Could I suggest that the third part of the motion be amended to direct staff to bring back a report on January 17th sorry, I'm just, I had it and then it left my brain for a moment. To bring back a report on January 17th related to the process for community engagement for the MZO, and to discuss the scheduling of a special meeting to consider the request. I would ask the clerk just to hold for a moment on. So on January 17th, you are choosing to announce the date and time for the special meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
It may be prudent for us to develop a brief staff report to talk about the process for doing so, after we've had the engagement with the municipal solicitor and have some more information and some advice for the process.
Okay, I'm satisfied with that.
So Clerk Middleholtz, if you could add to the end of that. Oops, it's gone. Oh, okay, got you.
Councillor Gerber, would you like to make a comment while we're waiting?
Just to add to the end of that, sorry, Mayor. And to make a recommendation regarding the scheduling of a special meeting to consider the matter.
Beauty.
And what was after special meeting? My apologies.
To consider the matter.
So, Councillor Gerber, did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I thought what started this whole process was the fact that we weren't going to be ready to do anything on the 17th. So the whole idea was that we were not going to have any reports, that we were not going to listen to questions and answers from the developer, that was all going to happen in February, and then we were going to make a decision in February. Now it seems like we're back to having a meeting on the 17th, which is going to answer all the questions and do all the things that we were originally going to do on the 17th. And we've only added just one other meeting to make the decision. I mean, my only concern was that we make a decision by the end of February. So if this gets us there, I'm okay with that. But I thought our whole intention in revisiting the end of the resolution was to not have staff have to commit resources to working on a report around this particular issue in the midst of the budget process and all the curveballs that COVID has been given us. So I guess what I expected to see was a motion that would say that we would consider on February the 14th, and I'll put a date there, that we would have an information meeting on February the 14th to consider all the questions and the answers, and for staff to have a chance to give us an actual recommendation, et cetera, and that we would consider all that information and come back and make a decision on February 28th. So that's sort of where I had landed. And like I said, this seems to go back to doing a bunch of work on January 17th, which I think Mr. Krafka suggested was not the preferred route that we wanted to go with this. So that's, and I don't know, Councillor Gordick, are we sort of seeing things similarly here?
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, like I don't know whether Ms. Middleholtz misunderstood, but it seems to be that we need to go back, like re-edit 3 or 4 times, because the original motion that was amended to be special, but I think what Ms. Chambers has asked is on top of making a date, because what you've said here is make a special meeting to consider the matter. We don't want to consider the matter at a special date. The special date is going to be set for information purposes only. So somewhere with all of this, we've gone back to making a decision, which we aren't going to be making a decision until the end of February. So the first paragraph that you had originally, that you had the yellow highlight, was correct, but I believe Ms. Chambers is asking for a report that has provided some answers from our solicitor to be presented for the general public to know why we've made a decision. So I think that the motion here has been amended too much and has gone back to what we don't want it to be. January 17th was to be an announcement of a special meeting sometime in February. The third meeting would be for a recommendation for or against accepting the MZO resolution. This puts it all together. for the first meeting in February, which is not what we wanted.
If I may, sir.
Go ahead, Ms. Middleholz.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. What the recommendation is saying is that council is directing staff to bring a report on the 17th to outline a process for community engagement relative to the MZO request. So this is a report saying that there would be a information gathering meeting is the first part. Information gathering meeting, meaning that there would be that first meeting for the purposes of listening to delegations following the applicant's response on this initial round of questions. And then to make a recommendation for the scheduling of a special meeting to consider the matter. So as part of this staff report on the 17th, we would be proposing a date where council would make the consideration.
We were not, but the whole thing is you've missed the second meeting, Ms. Middleholz. There
That's in
should
the
be,
first part of the sentence.
I don't believe that that's what that says. And I don't think anybody else does. The first one actually specified that it would be for information purposes. It does not say anything in there about special information purposes. It says a special meeting to consider the matter. And we have said we do not want to consider the matter until we've had the other meeting. I think that the wording of this leaves too much interpretation, and I'm not comfortable with the wording of it myself, because to me, this is saying that we're making a decision the next meeting that we decide in January.
Then perhaps the CAO can clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was not suggesting a comprehensive report on the matter on January 17th, simply to bring forward a report after we've heard from the township lawyer in terms of the process for setting the meeting and making a decision. I think, you know, this the debate is kind of going around in circles, and perhaps the third portion of this recommendation is creating some confusion. So I think Councillor Gerber had a suggestion regarding some dates in February in which a public meeting could be held, and I'm wondering if council would consider him putting those forward for inclusion as the third section of this recommendation. Could you clarify again those dates, Councillor Gerber?
Yes, thank you through Mayor Armstrong to Ms. Chambers. Yes, that's sort of the third part. Mention that the council hold another information meeting or a special council meeting, whatever you'd like to call it. I'm open to whatever terminology we want to use. A similar meeting to what we've just held, I believe, is sort of our intent on the 14th of February to further provide opportunities for the developer to answer all the questions that will have been submitted in the next sort of week or two, to provide our staff to sort of see all the questions that have been submitted to them. And then on February 28th, we would hold the public meeting to act on a staff report that we'll hear on the 28th, containing their final recommendation around accepting or rejecting the MZO proposal. And in that way, again, we've sort of cleared the runway to allow us to focus on the budget process. I know, obviously, Mr. O'Craft is going to be going down two tracks a little bit during the next little while. But since it was sort of his suggestion that he could use a bit more time on this, I don't feel so bad doing that to him. So those would be the modifications that I think were sort of meet everyone's criteria as far as providing further opportunities for public input, transparency, and consultation, and allow staff to sort of deal with all that we're dealing with, allow council to deal with the budget process and this, and still have some dates that people can sort of hang their hat on and say, hey, now I know February 14th, I can, if I want to delegate again or whatever I want to do to share more thoughts or to hear what the developer's saying. And on the 28th, they'll know that, that our goal is to make a decision.
I think those two lines do set that. We just have to figure out where to put them. Ms. Chambers?
I apologize. I think the third section of that resolution would then have to be deleted.
Yeah, we wouldn't need anything on the 17th as far as the staff report, I think.
Sorry, I was drafting before I deleted the first one. Bear with me.
Councillor Gordick, did you want to comment? I think we can leave it as it is there, that, and you know, whatever happens with the our information meeting can determine if there's anything more needed between now and the 17th. I think we can just leave it at that. Oh. Councillor Fisher?
I'm comfortable with that wording there, Mayor. Yeah, and February 28th is our regular scheduled meeting, so it can be incorporated in there. So that's good.
Yep, that's correct. Councillor Gordick?
And as an aside, gentlemen, it doesn't mean you don't have to buy flowers or chocolates, okay?
It's actually my wife's birthday too.
Oh, we'll have hearts all around. Okay, I guess everybody's comfortable with the motion that as it is. And Councillor Hallman moved it. And Councillor Gordick seconded. Did we get? Yeah. So Ms. Middleholtz, read the resolution.
That report DS 2022-001 be received for information. The council set a date of January 10th, 2022 for an education session with the township solicitor respecting Minister's Zoning Order (MZO). That council hold an information gathering session, information gathering special council meeting on February 14th, 2022. And further, the council set February 28th, 2022 to make a decision on the final recommendation on the MZO request.
Very good, thank you. So that's moved and seconded. And all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So our next item for tonight is the confirmatory bylaw recommendation, that bylaw number 2022-01 to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held on January 4th, 2022 be introduced, ready first, second, and third, and finally passed in open council. That is moved by Councillor Fisher and Councillor Gordick. And all in favor? That is carried. And the next recommendation is that we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor. And Councillor Gordon, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? Oh, you're only allowed to put one hand up. All right, that's it. That's carried. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.